And the prudence should prevail. Prudence shouldn't be equated to inaction. Politicized work shouldn't be confused with real work. Our common responsibility is to look for, through a common diplomacy, solutions that can be sustained, that underscore interdependence of human rights, civil rights, environmental rights, and all other rights, and the need to strengthen independent mechanisms and less politicized ones for oversight, such as the case of the bodies in the inter-American human rights system. Our responsibility as member states is not create false dichotomies that separate us using rhetoric to split countries in different areas. This is easy, and it could even lead to something in the digital world, but it doesn't lead to real solutions and ongoing sustainable solutions, nor does it really contribute to overcome the gap between obligations and implementation. Now, the true courage resides in grappling with the crisis of multilateralism with more dialogue and diplomacy, so as to find ways to overcome the selectivity and the use of two different ways for two different measures, and avoiding the independent organizations becoming subject to lack of human rights. We have to use methods, but not threats for financial subjugation. But we have to look at a new kind of human rights with the consolidation of a liberal view. We have to have monetary selectivity and not extreme politicization. If we cannot save human rights from these kinds of attacks, if we continue using the multilateral stage for a parallel reality and having certain things that will be prioritized, then we will get into a new era of darkness and civilization crisis. Now it's time to take on the responsibility of changing the path forward, to substitute monologue with real dialogue, to have a view of human rights that looks at interdependence of these rights, which ensures inclusion and diversity, that looks at the excluded and the most vulnerable, and thus using the Universal Declaration of 1948 and the Corpus Juris of international law of human rights since that time. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a Brasil.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Uruguay has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Uruguay is very happy to co-sponsor this special session of the Permanent Council in commemoration of the International Day of Human Rights. Every 10th of December, we renew our belief in protection, aware that human dignity is the ethical and juridical bedrock of our democracy. In members of politicization and things that lead to discrimination and setbacks in different attitudes, the International Day of Human Rights reminds us that freedom is fundamental and the principle of non-discrimination, social integration are interdependent and complementary at the same time. Uruguay is a firm defender of multilateralism and the rule of law, the intangible right of the inter-American system of human rights. The Commission, the Inter-American Court, and special rapporteurs are fundamental pillars to strengthen democracy, to prevent abuses, and to guarantee that no person is outside or far afield of protection and justice. Mr. Chairman, this commemoration takes on a special meaning for Uruguay in a year in which we celebrate 4 decades of democracy, which has been uninterrupted. Our country lived between 1973 and 1985, a dictatorship which violated systematically all human rights, the most basic ones including committing and having torture, arbitrary detention, abuses, sexual abuses, forced disappearances, and political persecution which marked our society. These practices were interlinked in the transnational repression known as the Condor Plan, which aimed to eliminate all forms of political dissidents in the Southern Cone countries. The Condor Plan represented a total negation of the values that we defend in this organization and is a reminder of where the abuse of state power can go when these doctrines are linked to national security. We firmly sustain that there's no development nor safety nor stability based on impunity. Memory is an obligation. It's a democratic obligation. Justice is a duty for victims and the guarantee to not repeat anything for the entire region. And that is why our country continues to move ahead in judicial processes in the quest for the disappeared people, in looking at the files of that period, and in strengthening our institutions. These efforts don't belong to the past. They define us today as a democratic nation. We recognize the fundamental role that the inter-American system has had in accompanying victims and the policies of the state that our country has built when it comes to human rights. And in point of fact, the decisions of the Commission and the Inter-American Courts have been key for the victims of the state. They have helped us to strengthen our institutions and to consolidate legislative frameworks that reflect regional standards when it comes to transnational justice. Access to information, freedom of expression, the fight against impunity, and guarantees that things will not be repeated. The experience of terrorism of the state teaches us, Mr. Chairman, that when human rights are weakened, the international community has the responsibility to act strongly with firmness, and that's why we defend robust multilateralism with clear principles. The OAS should continue to be a space where victims are heard and where states realize and are accountable, a space that is guided by international standards and where states are not indifferent to the abuses of power where things happen. Today, Uruguay would like to underscore that democratic prevalence is a priority and should be a priority for those who deal with situations of greater vulnerability. Women who are subject to gender violence, children who don't have access to basic advantages, for Afro-descendants and indigenous people who suffer structural issues, from refugees and migrants who would like to recommence their life, for LGBTQ who are victims of discrimination, communities that are displaced because of crisis, climate crisis, and defenders of human rights, journalists and leaders that continue to give their life for simply accompanying things and denunciating things. On the International Day of Human Rights, we reaffirm the premise of the rights of man and human rights and the American Declaration. We are convinced and we truly believe that the preamble tells us freedom, justice, and peace in the world is based on recognition of dignity and equal inalienable rights of all members of the human family. This 10th of December, we reaffirm our trust in the inter-American system and in the value of political dialogue to strengthen the democratic culture and to prevent setbacks when it comes to the culture of human rights for all nations of the hemisphere. We have forged all of this in the last 5 decades. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Uruguay. El Salvador has the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We truly appreciate the delegations who requested that this issue or this item be included on the agenda. Every year we join in the commemoration of International Day of Human Rights. And at this time, as a region, it brings us together to think about the value of standards of human rights for the OAS. We underscore the historical legacy and the contributions of states from our region that have been able to crystallize the rights and the rights of men in instruments such as the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against People with Disabilities, the Inter-American Convention for the Protection of Human Rights of Adults, and the Belém do Pará Convention on Against Violence Against Women. They have been pioneers in laying down the bedrock for all of these principles in states. In this regard, then, it is crucial that inter-American standards are upheld in line with those instruments in the terms in which they were accepted and ratified, because it's based on this that states can guarantee, protect, and promote rights that are enshrined in those documents, and this will contribute to these standards to continue to be the framework to strengthen our institutions and gear and guide our public policies and ensure that each achievement is translated into concrete protection for all people. In El Salvador, under the leadership of President Nayib Bukele, we have spearheaded deep-seated transformations that are based on the protection of right to life as a fundamental pillar based on which all other rights are based. Thanks to policies which are geared toward restoring peace and security, millions of Salvadorans today can exercise their rights in conditions which were hitherto unthinkable. This recovery of the public space of daily peace and tranquility and the trust in the state reflects a firm commitment to human dignity and to building a country where each and every person can live free of violence. And in addition to that, we have undertaken efforts to spearhead economic development as a crucial, essential component for the full-fledged realization of human rights. Investments, modernization of public infrastructure, promotion of tourism, and setting up a safe environment for productive activities, which generates new opportunities for employment and has strengthened the national economy. These achievements not only speak to development, but they have an impact on improving conditions of life and the quality of life for all the population, and favors a more fruitful environment to exercise rights such as the right to education and health. And given that, then, El Salvador sees economic development as a key instrument to guarantee well-being, dignity, and opportunities, real opportunities for all of our inhabitants. From this experience, El Salvador reiterates its willingness to continue to dialogue and cooperate within the OAS to continue to strengthen inter-American standards and promote real implementation for the benefit of all people of the hemisphere, with a view to defending democracy, to promote justice, to fight against poverty, and to build peace. Thank you very much.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much. Mexico has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My delegation truly appreciates the inclusion of this very relevant topic on the agenda today, even though it was requested by Mexico and a distinguished group of delegations alongside us, with a view to remembering the central importance of this date. My country is very proud to have played a very active role, which is relevant when it comes to building the multilateral universal system, from the Conference of San Francisco, as well as the Inter-American System of Human Rights. Our participation in adopting the American Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man was the very beginning of an ongoing commitment for the defense of human rights, which was consolidated as we joined the Inter-American Convention of Human Rights and the very important acceptance of the contentious competence of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in 1998. We have subscribed to and ratified fundamental instruments such as the Belém do Pará Convention, the Inter-American Convention for the Prevention and Sanction of Torture, and the San Salvador Protocol, the two Inter-American Conventions on Racism and Discrimination, and the Inter-American Convention on Adults. The interaction with the Inter-American System of Human Rights has also been a driving force for internal transformation in our country. The constitutional reforms in Mexico, especially from 2012, underscore the hierarchy of human rights and the international treaties in our constitutional order, thus consolidating control of the conventions as an indispensable tool for all authorities of the Mexican state. This is a decision that has enriched the judicial dialogue and has allowed us to harmonize our standards with inter-American standards. In November 2024, sustainable or substantial equality got a constitutional rank in Mexico for the very first time in 2 centuries of independent life. We are very proud to say that we have a woman president of our republic, Claudia Sheinbaum Parro, who has placed equality front stage center for national commitment. We reaffirm our commitment for the principles of universality, interdependence, indivisibility, and progressiveness of human rights, with all of the commitments that this decision implies. Given the deep-seated challenges that our hemisphere has right now, it is necessary to value and consolidate this notable legacy built on the shoulders of long centuries, ensuring that the Inter-American System of Human Rights continues to comply with its function to protect and defend all people. And particularly, we have to preserve the independence and the autonomy of the Commission and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and avoid any political instrumentalization that could water down its essence. The commemoration of the International Day of Human Rights is an opportunity to not forget this very important legacy and to keep this collective view in favor of human dignity. And this is also an opportunity to strengthen the institutions, the basic institutions for protecting human dignity in our region. Mexico recognizes the valuable work carried out by the IACHR and the court. These are main bodies of our system that need to be strengthened, and that states must do so with the responsibility and political decisions that are necessary to do so. We reiterate our clarion call to member states who haven't yet done so to ratify the American Convention on Human Rights and all other inter-American instruments that are part and parcel of the backbone of our system of human rights, because multilateral cooperation, the defense of human dignity, and consolidation of the rule of law can only be achieved by carrying out these collective initiatives. We reaffirm our commitment to the inter-American system, which is strengthened to deal adequately with the complex challenges of the 21st century for the benefit of dignity and all people. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mexico, Paraguay has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin by thanking the delegations who proposed and who included the inclusion of this commemoration on the agenda today. I also appreciate the panelists for their very valuable comments, and particularly the President of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights and the President of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights for their contributions via their messages. These kinds of bodies always invite us to think about the importance of these. They march humanity, and particularly the development of multilateralism. As we are wont to say, it is difficult to value what we recognize, and that is why to spend a couple of moments to think about what we have will make us understand the work that we do here. Today, we commemorate the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, approved on the 10th of December 1948 by the General Assembly of the United Nations. At that time, things were developed in Paris in sessions before the organization had its permanent headquarters in New York. I should also like to say that this historic resolution wasn't adopted by consensus, and there were 8 abstentions. Paraguay voted in favor, as it did 2 years after that, when the General Assembly appointed on the 10th of December the International Day for Human Rights. We feel that the Universal Declaration inspired the adoption of about 60 international treaties when it comes to human rights, a figure that is extraordinary, actually, if we consider that it comes from one sole resolution. Furthermore, it's one of the most fruitful documents, most recognized with more than 60 different sessions, which reflects its importance and its universal appeal. All of this reminds us of the impact and the relevance of the work that we carry out in this organization. The Universal Declaration, alongside the American Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man, adopted in Bogota only 8 months after, represent an inheritance which is shared by our hemisphere and by the international community. This is a permanent call to strengthen the dialogue, cooperation, and collective responsibility. So in this spirit, it is important that the many hours that we devote to declarations and negotiations with a view to coming up with agreements and avoid discussions that don't lead to results and that strengthen trust amongst our delegations should not be overlooked. A consensus should be undoubtedly one of the biggest strengths of the inter-American system, an objective that we always should aspire towards. Thus, Mr. Chairman, finally, I would like to underscore that in 2025, the Republic of Paraguay, for the very first time, had a judge on the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and for the third time around received a meeting in the tribunal. And this fact coincided with the 20th anniversary of the first session held outside of the headquarters, which took place in Paraguay in 2005. And this reaffirms the firm commitment that my country has with the inter-American system of human rights. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paraguay. Argentina has the floor. Mr. Chairman, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished panelists, and other members of the Secretariat, Argentina has a historical career which is deeply linked to the defense of human rights. Unfortunately, our country knows through its own painful experience what violation, systematic and planned violations of fundamental rights means. And on this heavy history, we built a democratic consensus, a collective consensus which cannot be turned back in defense of promotion of fundamental rights. As I said previously, today on the 10th of December, 48 years have passed of uninterrupted democracy in Argentina, the longest period in our entire history. And every day, living in democracy and human rights as a key pillar of our political system has to be looked at. This consensus projected a active foreign policy for the protection of human rights, both universally as well as in the inter-American system. Argentina has done the work in the inter-American human rights system and the inter-American court, and invited and received visits for its mechanisms, has cooperated looking at the situation in the country, and has backed strengthening the institutional capacity. The Argentine government has the defense of fundamental rights of all human beings, the dignity of the individual, freedom to think, express, and be associated and undertake and develop their life's project, which is the backbone of the policies of human rights. From this standpoint, then, Argentina would like to unambiguously protect the freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of association, independence of legal powers, the principle of legality, and due process. There is no authentic development nor any authentic justice without the sacrifices that have to be made. This is not anything that is negotiated. It's the bedrock on which we can build the rule of law and the legitimate exercise of public power. And based on this, then, Mr. Chairman, I would like to reaffirm that Argentina cannot and it will not be indifferent in the violations that are documented when it comes to human rights that undergird authoritarian regimes in our region, and exhaustively in initiatives of the IACHR and the UNHCR and in various mechanisms of monitoring. We have realized repression patterns, political persecution, jailing of opponents, censure, closing off of civic space, and the systematic use of state violence. These practices have been pointed out time and time again in specific contexts of countries that do not respect the democratic charter, where we see attacks to defenders of human rights and those in civil society, as well as grave oversights of due process. Today, looking at this commemoration, we would like to reaffirm its condemnation of these breaches and the political prisons that have been picked up, and the halt of, I should say, the disappearance of people, and take on the full respect of human rights in conventions and other treaties, and the reestablishment of democracy and the rule of law in those countries in which we have dedicated a lot of time in these discussions. Silence when it comes to these breaches is not neutrality. It's a way of accepting these situations, Mr. Chairman. Also, I should like to underscore that defense of human rights is not just about denunciations of the grave violations. It also means we have to create the conditions so that our societies live in peace, with stability, institutions that are stable, economic development, and social well-being. We have to guarantee these pillars. This is a task that is shared throughout the region that requires solid cooperation, coordinated responses, and a sustained commitment to strengthen the rule of law and the capacity of our states. To conclude, we reaffirm our historical commitment, and this is for the defense of human dignity and fundamental freedoms. We renew our conviction that the inter-American system for the protection of all should be strengthened. It should be used with determination to deal with violations and support those who, in adverse conditions, continue to go after democracy. Argentina will continue to work alongside other member states and the General Secretariat to oversee implementation of human rights in the hemisphere, and so that it's not a rhetorical aspiration. It's a legal and political obligation that we have to honor every single day. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Gracias, Argentina. Tiene la
Thank you, Argentina. Bolivia is recognized. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the outstanding panelists for their important presentations in this day where we commemorate the International Day of Human Rights, where we remember the historic adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the United Nations in 1948. The objective since then has been to build a new path for the international community with a view toward a fairer, more united and equal world in order for differences between human beings to be addressed as a factor of complementarity, coexistence, diversity, wealth, and mutual learning. Today, we face new challenges in an international context that's quite complex, and Bolivia reiterates its commitment to promoting, protecting, and guaranteeing all human rights, civil rights, as well as political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights in the framework of international instruments along these lines, and our political constitution, as well as the pacifist vocation of the Bolivian people. For Bolivia, this commemoration is extremely important, and it's a new opportunity for us to raise awareness and revindicate human dignity, liberty, and the ongoing fight for reducing gaps in inequality, as well as defending democracy and the rule of law. From our Ministry of Foreign Relations, we are commemorating this day through dialogue to strengthen human rights in Bolivia, which will have participation from young people, activists, and human rights defenders, as well as representatives of public institutions and civil society organizations and international organizations. The objective is to build a space where we can share knowledge and ideas on individual and collective rights, as well as build a culture of peace and democratic value. However, beyond the various commemorations and activities in Bolivia, it's very important for the commitments of states to lead to concrete activities within societies in order to ensure that respect and recognition of full exercise of human rights transcends discourse and becomes a tangible reality. For example, that all people may enjoy a life of dignity with access to work, appropriate food, healthcare services, that women and girls have a life free of violence, for the elderly to enjoy a dignified retirement, to fight any form of discrimination and racism, for legal systems serve to protect people, for elections always to be free and transparent, among so many other activities that allow us to recognize human dignity and equal rights, which are inalienable for all members of the human family, as established in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we are discussing today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Bolivia. Costa Rica is recognized. Good afternoon, Chair. Today we are commemorating the International Day of Human Rights, and this is a day that reminds the international community that human dignity is just a starting point for democratic coexistence. Every December 10th, we reiterate our message from the Universal Declaration adopted in 1948, and our region has a historic tie to this origin, as noted in the concept note distributed for this item on the agenda. The American states played a decisive role in drafting the content of the Universal Declaration. Before that, in Bogota, 1948, we had already shown the world the Inter-American Declaration on Human Rights. This date is not just a date for commemoration, it's a moment for renewal. We live in a global era which requires more rights, not less. And during a time of such polarization, the human rights agenda continues to be the most effective, humane, and realistic response to addressing today's challenges. Human rights are not abstract concepts, they are tangible and essential elements of day-to-day life. The right to due process and justice, equality before the law, and participating in a citizen's agenda without fear, the right to live free of violence, discrimination, and exclusion. But it's also a very inter-American day. It invites us to recognize that our region has developed an autonomous, specialized architecture here. The Inter-American Human Rights System is made up of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the Inter-American Court on Human Rights, as noted in the concept note. The Inter-American Human Rights System has led to establishing standards that are binding and guide our states. It strengthens the rule of law and opens the door toward protection, reparation, and the truth. Today, we'd like to underscore in particular the role of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The court represents not only the highest regional court in this area, it's the promise of justice, which may arrive even when states fail. It's the last instance for victims, the last recourse for those at risk to ensure their right to truth. Its legal precedents have led to a robust tradition that forms public policies and inspires constitutional reforms, impacting directly communities that don't have a voice. It connects the letters of our treaties with the day-to-day life of individuals. We often take our rights for granted. We think that they've already been won because they were written down. We commemorate the International Day of Human Rights means recognize that this is part of a struggle, and we all bear a responsibility here. It's not enough to talk about rights. We need to build them and guarantee them through robust constitutions, inclusive public policies, independent judiciaries. This is part of our day-to-day commitment to our citizens. This is a day that's also a call to action, to renew our commitment at the hemispheric level, to ensure that we bring rights to the day-to-day life to people, to strengthen the Inter-American system, protect those who defend it, and ensure that no one is left behind. Human rights continue to be valid, achievable, and feasible. We need to do as much as possible to protect peace, development, and ensure that human rights are not a privilege, nor are they simply a far-off ideal. This is the foundation where we build free societies. This is the shared language that leads our region through complex times and ensures that human beings are always the highest tool and the future generations are where our future lies. Thank you. Thank you, Costa Rica. I give the floor to St. Lucia.
Thank you, Chair. On the outset, my delegation expresses appreciation to the panelists for their presentations. St. Lucia joins in recognition of International Human Rights Day and in reflection of the standing promise contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration remains one of the most remarkable global affirmations of the inherent dignity and equal worth of all persons, which principles continue to guide us across regions, across governments, and across generations. For our part, the government of St. Lucia continues to ensure that the protection of human rights is always at the forefront of its policies and daily work, ensuring that we build a fair and stable society where every citizen, every person feels seen, protected, and valued. In a country of our size, where communities are closely connected and institutions must carry the trust of the people they serve, respect for rights of persons becomes one of the most important pillars of natural life. We have recognized that when human rights are respected, the rule of law is strengthened, public confidence grows, and social and economic development is more evenly shared. The Hemisphere has contributed greatly to the global architecture of human rights through instruments and institutions that continue to influence international thought and state practice. The American Declaration, adopted even before the Universal Declaration, stands as proof of the leadership that originated here in this hemisphere. Today provides an opportunity for all states in the Americas to measure ourselves against the standards we claim to uphold. It reminds us that rights are not selective, and that dignity does not depend on nationality, wealth, or position. St. Lucia strongly believes that progress is only meaningful when people are free to enjoy the full range of their rights. We therefore encourage every member of this council to deepen their effort to defend liberty, fairness, equality, and justice. These are the rightful possession of every person and not values reserved for the fortunate. On this day, we give thanks for the work done in this hemisphere to advance the protection of rights, and we remain committed in strengthening that foundation. Our collective duty is to ensure that freedom is real, that justice is accessible, and that human dignity is never negotiated. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias. Thank you to Saint Lucia. The delegation from Guatemala is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Guatemala is grateful for the interventions from the panelists. Their commitment and experience notably strengthen this space for hemispheric dialogue. Every December 10th, the international community commemorates the International Day for Human Rights. And this is a day when the UNGA adopted on 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is an instrument that inaugurated a new chapter in contemporary history in recognizing for the very first time a catalog of universal rights and freedoms that are inherent to all individuals. For our region, this date is also particularly meaningful. The American states were leaders in conceiving the content of the Universal Declaration and provided doctrine, diplomatic, and regulatory reflections which left their mark. The Inter-American Declaration of Human Rights was also adopted in Bogota and became the first international instrument on human rights of general scope, laying the foundation for what we have today. Over 70 years later, this is an ongoing call for collective action. Thus, we reiterate our commitment to respecting and promoting the universality of human rights. In the hemisphere, this work is done by the Inter-American Human Rights System, and this is a tireless partner here. The Commission and the Court, as well as the regulatory framework and the community, they have been tenets in consolidating fairer, more inclusive, and respectful societies. Against a regional backdrop where we still see structural challenges, reiterating the value of the Inter-American system for human rights protection has become more necessary than ever. This is a space that allows us to work together in coming up with guidelines and principles to address the complexity of today's era through respectful solutions. Celebrating today at the OAS Permanent Council is an opportunity to renew our commitment, shed light on advancements, recognize challenges, and promote a culture of human rights that is translated into tangible activities. In this sense, Guatemala would like to highlight a significant step forward in our national agenda, that is the recent presentation of the public policy for the protection of human rights defenders. This was shared on November 13th of this year, and it's a policy drafted to fulfill the court decision defending human rights, a case against Guatemala that was issued by the Inter-American Court in 2013. And this is part of a sustained process that began in 2016, aimed at providing appropriate conditions and safety for those who carry out the brave task of defending human rights. The policy is based on three principles: preventive mechanisms in the face of threats, implementation of a comprehensive protection system, and strengthening coordination with the justice sector in order to ensure effective access to justice and dignified reparations. These three axes reflect our conviction that protecting human rights defenders is indispensable for strengthening democratic institutionality and building trustworthy environments for citizen participation. My government also would like to note that all human rights are at the heart of our public policy, and along these lines, the Inter-American Commission recently presented in Guatemala its report, The Situation of Human Rights in Guatemala. This is the fruit of the in situ visit in July 2024. We're also honored that Guatemala will be the site of the 192nd session of the IACHR in 2026, and we are looking forward to cooperation and constructive dialogue there. We similarly have asked the court for an advisory opinion on democracy and its protection in the framework of the Inter-American system. This is a process that will continue into next year with public hearings. Chair, distinguished delegations, Guatemala reiterates its commitment to strengthening the inter-American system and promoting and protecting human rights as a fundamental tool of democracy and peace in our region. This commemoration of the International Day of Human Rights must renew our collective determination to continue building a more dignified, equitable, and humane hemisphere. Thank you very much. Thank you to Guatemala. The delegation of Belize is recognized.
Chair,
Belize expresses appreciation to the delegation that requested the inclusion of this agenda item and extends thanks to the presenters for their valuable contributions to today's commemoration. We join member states in marking International Human Rights Day, recalling the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the foundational leadership of the Americas, reflected in the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man. These landmark instruments continue to guide regional and global efforts to advance dignity, equality, and justice. In observing this day, Belize highlights both progress achieved and the work that remains. National efforts to strengthen the human rights framework continue through institutional enhancements, legislative reforms, and improved interagency coordination. Initiatives to reinforce accountability within the justice and security sectors, expand social protection, and address the needs of vulnerable groups remain central to Belize's development approach. Belize's commitment to gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is further reflected in recent recognition. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women commended Belize for improving educational access, including through targeted support for students for low-income households. At the same time, Belize acknowledges ongoing challenges, including gender-based violence, persistent inequalities, and social vulnerabilities experienced by children, migrants, and indigenous communities. Public education, localized engagement, and collaboration with civil society continue to play a key role in strengthening national responses and promoting a culture of human rights. Belize also recognizes that many human rights concerns transcend national boundaries. Regional collaboration is therefore indispensable. Continued engagement within the OAS, technical cooperation with specialized bodies, and partnerships with neighboring states support Belize's institutional development and contribute to broader hemispheric objectives. These exchanges inform ongoing national efforts, including work towards establishing a Paris Principles compliant national human rights institution and improving treaty reporting and implementation. As the hemisphere faces complex challenges such as socioeconomic pressures and climate impacts, Belize underscores that the values enshrined in the Universal Declaration and the American Declaration remain vital guideposts. Today's commemoration offers space to reaffirm shared commitments and collective resolve. Belize reiterates its dedication to strengthening human rights, protections at home, and to collaborating with regional partners to promote more just, inclusive, and resilient societies across the Americas. Thank you.
Gracias, Belice.
Thank you, Belize. The distinguished representative of Colombia is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Congratulations, warm greetings to all of the ambassadors present today, including alternate representatives and the ambassadors from the permanent observer missions. At the outset, I would like to thank and recognize you as the presidents of the bodies of the system, Luis Caballero from the Inter-American Commission and Judge Nancy Hernandez from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, as well as Florencia de Sejil. Thank you very much for your very valuable work on behalf of human rights. And we all know what we're commemorating today is the International Day of Human Rights, which reminds us of the historic commitment shouldered by the international community in 1948 with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and which was already established in our hemisphere with the Inter-American Declaration of Human Rights and the duties of man. These instruments were not mere declarations. They were ethical compacts. They were legal agreements that defined the structure of today's international human rights structures. Yet, my predecessors have already stated that the tides are not easy right now when it comes to promoting and defending human rights. Many voices have talked about the fact that unfortunately we are looking at a lot of setbacks today. It's not just a matter of changing extreme political positions, but a progressive abandonment even when it comes to the discourse on human rights. And this discourse, which was built on the ashes of the Second World War, was used for decades as a source of legitimacy for governments, parties, and even for states themselves. These states had shouldered concrete commitments to ensure its enforcement both domestically and even expand its scope in the context of armed conflict. It was indispensable for the contentious parties to respect those standards, with the understanding that violating these standards would lead to very serious international consequences. Today, in the 21st century, we find ourselves in an organization facing a profound reorganization of the international system characterized by distribution of power at the global scale. The countries which are competing for global hegemony share similarities in our economic models and the interaction between states, between the markets themselves, and even in their ideology. They look very similar even in the way that they choose to violate human rights. This setback is reflected in concrete events, human tragedies like we see in Gaza, deaths in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, and deaths in Ukraine, often in the face of indifferent governments. And I insist that we must recognize the recent communique from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights from December 2nd with regard to unilateral actions that have a serious impact on human rights, as well as the advisory opinion 32 from the Inter-American Court, which considered the nature of these laws. They are building a narrative in which human rights are no longer the guiding principles and even presented as a hurdle to geopolitical stability. This trend is dangerous. It fritters away at the international system and opens the door to a new world order sustained on discrimination and inequality, and with it weakening international human rights law and multilateralism. International organizations dedicated to protecting human rights, in particular, this organization, have contributed to strengthening our work in defending these rights and allowing us to make great strides. However, that may not always influence the behavior and decisions of government, which is a situation worsening every time we see that there are violations of international law and human rights in our hemisphere. That is why in this commemoration I must reiterate that international human rights law and international law are inseparable. They are sine qua non if we are going to promote and ensure human rights as the central axis of international relations. And its principles must be shouldered not only as a legal commitment, but rather as an ethical imperative. And therefore, we must call on everyone to strengthen the Inter-American human rights system to promote peaceful conflict resolution and ensuring that human rights continue to be the axis of all of our decisions. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Colombia. I give the floor to Ecuador.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Madam ASG, authorities at the head table, Your Excellencies, distinguished representatives. What's happening today? Just as in yesteryear, plagues, threats of war, and doubts as to authority itself force us to look at the visions of the world and our ability to use it to transform realities, even more in eras when organized crime, drug trafficking, terrorism, and corruption, including political corruption, have beset mankind. And that is why we have once again seen the need to revalue human beings, reason, dignity, and education. 77 years ago, the UN General Assembly adopted a declaration. It's clear that recognition on a text was not sufficient, maybe even unnecessary. Every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. This position stemmed from a long humanist tradition that was led from historic anthropocentrism, from Salamanca to the independence movements and the founding fathers of the United Nations in 1948. This was an essential and radical idea. The dignity of persons is not something granted by a government, nor by the majority, nor by force. It is inherent and superior to any form of power or organization, and this is the fruit of many different decisions. It has been recognized. Humanism in its Christian vision, which had such a profound impact on our hemisphere, but also on secular and universal theories, was what fed this conviction that every human being is unique, cannot be replaced. And the very idea of inherent rights without this would have been unthinkable. This should be obvious, but we can't be naive. We can't ignore that building this category of human rights, its invention as well as its use in discourse and protection at the regulatory level, has also been a tool for politicians and politics. Human rights should be liberated of this weaponization, and the path forward will always be returning to our roots, to the moment of inspiration, and fundamentally returning to the very humanism that forged it. And that is why today, while some claim that they are trying to reduce persons to their biological, economic, or identity functions in a total disconnect when they are selecting rights according to what's most convenient in the moment, it's more necessary than ever for us to remember this very humanistic root of it all. We can't impose beliefs, but rather defend rights. In our region, this fragmentation has faces and identities, and that is why please allow me to propose through this council 2 lines of action for development, that we recover our needs with a clear humanistic vision. First of all, reorient always the debate on rights to its foundation, return to humanism to protect the collective, the individual. Second, strengthen the Inter-American Court and Commission as guardians of this comprehensive vision of dignity, not as adversaries of states, but rather as a living memory of the commitments that we freely shouldered when we stated that the humanism that forged us, that people are at the very heart of what we do. Chair, talking about humanism isn't nostalgia, it is urgent. We need the Inter-American system to become a catalog of good intentions without any buts. We must ensure dignity and respect, a humanism that is reborn, that recognizes and embraces us, where freedom and dignity are non-negotiables. This 10th of December should be an opportunity for us to renew this founding spirit. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ecuador. The Dominican Republic is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Dominican delegation truly appreciates putting this item on the agenda to commemorate the International Day of Human Rights. As we do each year, the international community reaffirms the universal value of human dignity and the need to build more fair, just, equal, and inclusive societies. Today, as in previous years, we renew this collective commitment, aware that the defense of human rights is a permanent duty. I would like to express our thanks to the presentations made by Commissioner José Luis Caballero, President of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and Judge Nancy Hernandez Lopez, President of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and Mrs. Maria Florencia Quillardo, Director of the Program for the Andean Region, North American and the Caribbean, and the Center for Justice and International Law. Their contributions shed light on the challenges and the opportunities that we confront in the hemisphere and reaffirm the importance of cooperation, dialogue, and strengthening of institutions to guarantee the real protection of human rights in all of our societies. The Dominican Republic, guided by the vision of President Abinader, has taken on the responsibility of strengthening its democratic institutions and advance with public policies that ensure fundamental rights of all people that live in our country. This commitment is reflected in concrete facts. First, in terms of aligning this vision, our government stands out given its progress in transparency, participation, and institutional strengthening, and indispensable pillars for a state that promotes and protects human rights. The consolidation of oversight organizations, visualization of public services, and other initiatives for accountability have contributed to open and accessible management for citizens. When it comes to social inclusion, the Dominican government has broadened its programs addressed at closing the inequality gaps through social protection programs and access to education and health and support for vulnerable populations. We continue to work to help people independent or irrespective of their vulnerability or origin so that they can fully live their rights. I should like to mention strengthening policies geared towards gender equality, the prevention of violence against women, and the promotion of economic and political development. As a country, we recognize sustainable development is only possible if we have equality between men and women. And as such, we have spearheaded concrete actions for the protection of children and adolescents across the board by strengthening systems that guarantee rights in safe environments. This is accompanied by more humane migratory policies that seek to balance out the respect for sovereignty of the state and compliance with international standards in human rights. When it comes to civil and political rights, we continue to strengthen our democratic culture by promoting freedom of expression, citizens' participation, and respect for diversity. The Dominican Republic wants a society where each voice counts and where all sectors feel represented and protected. Mr. Chairman, in this commemoration, we reaffirm our commitment to the inter-American system and with the essential work to protect and promote fundamental rights in our region. We will continue to actively participate in the mechanisms in multilateral dialogue, and we will contribute to the construction of a more just and inclusive hemisphere. We reiterate that our country will continue to move ahead with determination towards a society where human dignity is the bedrock of all public policies. We believe that the defense of human rights brings us together. It strengthens us and it inspires us to build a more prosperous future for our peoples. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dominican Republic. Canada has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I would like to thank the speakers for their contributions today. Today, for commemoration of human rights, we look at this foundation of peace, justice, and prosperity in the Americas. Today reminds us that the commitments have to be translated into specific actions. And we recognize our own path towards reconciliation with the indigenous peoples and that we have to promote their rights throughout the hemisphere. Nonetheless, today, our region is grappling with a lot of challenges, democratic rupture, a break in civic space. This was in the annual report of 2024 from the IACHR. We need to make progress. In English.
Journalists and civil society actors face intimidation and violence. Violence and impunity persist while marginalized communities including women, girls, 2S LGBTIQ+ persons, and indigenous peoples bear the brunt of these violations. Women and girls also remain at risk. Despite gains in political participation, structural barriers remain, including in our hemisphere, which continue to record some of the world's highest rates of gender-based violence. In this context, Canada condemns femicide and all forms of sexual and gender-based violence. For their part, Indigenous peoples, 42 million across the region, continue to face poverty, discrimination, and threats to their lands and cultures. Canada continues to take steps to ensure the full implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We also note with alarm the rise of organized anti-rights movements targeting women, girls, and especially 2S LGBTIQ+ communities. No one should be punished for who they are or whom they love. Human rights are universal and indivisible. As we face these challenges together, Canada will continue to work with OAS partners to strengthen institutions, protect civic space, and uphold the rule of law. We are proud to support the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the Inter-American Commission of Women, including through projects that defend women's rights and promote leadership. Canada is also proud to have signed the Inter-American Convention on Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women earlier this year. We are working towards ratification and will continue working with partners across the hemisphere to end violence against women. On this Human Rights Day, let us recommit to the universal and indivisible nature of human rights. Let us ensure that our words translate into bold, coherent action at home and abroad, because the true measure of our commitment lies in the lives we uplift and the justice we pursue. Finally, Mr. Chair, we would like to thank the sponsoring countries that have brought this item to the agenda today. We would like to go on record to say that we would like to join the list of sponsoring countries for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Jamaica has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, distinguished permanent representatives, colleagues, friends, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today, we gather to commemorate International Human Rights Day, a day marked each year on 10th December in recognition of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. This landmark document seeks to safeguard humanity and remains one of humanity's most powerful moral compasses. Let me take this opportunity to thank the delegations for ensuring that this important topic is placed on today's agenda. Thanks also to Commissioner Jose Luis Caballero of the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights and other presenters for their very comprehensive report and insightful interventions. For Jamaica, this observance carries a special historic significance. Our former Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Right Honorable Hugh Lawson Shearer, who during his tenure as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, proposed that United Nations declare in 1968 the International Year of Human Rights. His leadership reflected Jamaica's early and unwavering conviction that the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms must stand at the center of international cooperation, peace, and development. It is therefore with deep pride that we honor not only the global principles enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also Jamaica's own legacy in championing them on the world stage. As we commemorate this day, we are reminded that human rights are not abstract ideals. They are lived commitments rooted in respect for the inherent dignity of every person without distinction of race, gender, religion, nationality, political belief, or socioeconomic status. They demand our vigilance, our courage, and our collective will. Yet, around the world and within our hemisphere, we continue to witness challenges that test the strength of our commitments, threats to democratic governance, inequalities that hinder access to justice, gender-based violence, discrimination in all its forms, and the erosion of civil and political rights. The evolving digital landscape has not only introduced new opportunities for participation, but also new vulnerabilities for privacy, for the integrity of information, and for the protection of children and marginalized communities. In this environment, the role of the OAS as a defender of democratic values, human rights, and the rule of law is more vital than ever. Through the work of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the broader institutional framework of the organization, we are reminded that the protection of rights requires both principled advocacy and practical action. Jamaica remains committed to these efforts. We continue to strengthen our national human rights architecture, advance legislative reforms, promote gender equality, uphold the rights of persons with disabilities, and work towards creating safer, more inclusive societies. We do so not only as a matter of treaty obligation, but because we believe that the full realization of human rights is indispensable to human development, to justice, and to peace. As we reflect today, let us recommit ourselves to the unfinished work ahead. Let us reaffirm our dedication to dialogue, cooperation, and solidarity as pathways towards a hemisphere where every individual can enjoy the full protection of their rights. And let us honor the legacy of leaders like Hugh Lawson Shearer by ensuring that the principles he championed continue to guide our work. Mr. Chair, colleagues, as we mark International Human Rights Day, may we be inspired by the enduring message of the Universal Declaration that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This is not merely an aspiration, it is a responsibility, one that calls upon every nation represented here today. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Jamaica. Panama has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin by expressing our sincere thanks to the esteemed panelists for their very valuable interventions that give us a very enriching perspective as to the situation in institutions when it comes to human rights in our region. We have taken due note of their contributions. Today, we are together to commemorate International Human Rights Day, a date that marks the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a fundamental instrument in our midst and a guiding light devoted to the dignity of all human beings and gives all universal inalienable rights. The commitment of my country, Panama, with this instrument is stark. We proudly remember the internationalist Panameño Ricardo J. Alfaro, whose contribution was decisive in drafting the Universal Declaration in 1948. His work in the United Nations, including reintroduction of the draft of essential rights, was decisive for crystallizing the text that we celebrate today. In this spirit of Alfaro, we recommit our unwavering commitment to human rights, and we are the hub of the Americas for the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration. And with transparency, we present our examination to the Council of the United Nations. I would like to underscore that from 2024 to 2025, Panama made significant progress in human rights, spearheaded by the adoption in a legislative framework, given our active participation in international mechanisms for evaluation. First, in November 2025, Panama presented to the Human Rights Council its fourth national report in EPON. At that time, we reiterated our firm commitment for accountability, transparency, and we received valuable recommendations from the 89 member states that were geared towards continuing to strengthen and protect as well as promote human rights in the countries. As such, one of the most important milestones at the time was the passing of Law 431, the law that recognizes care as a human right and a shared responsibility. In June 2025, we got underway the first pilot plan with UN Women, geared towards alleviating the historic burden of unremunerated work, which falls on the shoulders mostly on women. for Rights of Adults, the Ministry of Social Development presented to the United Nations very important progress made to improve access to basic social services, looking at the focus of dignity and inclusiveness for this group. Panama received recognition as well by New Zealand for the progress made for equality and non-discrimination. As such, then, for the development of our legal instruments with a view to strengthening protection of people who live in vulnerable situations, including the protocol for judicial reforms for trafficking in people. These things have to be looked at. With an unwavering commitment, we make a respective clarion call to our member states to double up efforts to make it such that the principles of the Universal Declaration become a full-fledged reality for our entire hemisphere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Panama, for your comments. Peru has the floor. Good afternoon. In this commemoration of the International Day of Human Rights, Peru would like to reaffirm very clearly and categorically its commitment to the dignity of all human beings, the rule of law, and democracy. The defense and promotion of human rights is a policy of the state in Peru and a cross-cutting question of our foreign policy, especially when it comes to the Organization of American States. Our country has been and would like to continue to be a firm ally in the inter-American human rights system. Over the course of the last decades, Peru has constantly contributed to the strengthening of the Commission and the Inter-American Court. We have cooperated with its mechanisms. We have participated very actively in dialogues, and we have always, in all good faith, sought to implement the recommendations and decisions. This relationship is based on law, mutual respect, and a constructive spirit geared towards improving protection of people throughout the hemisphere. This commitment has a clear-cut foundation in our constitutional order. The political constitution of Peru in Article 1 stipulates that the defense of human beings and respect of their dignity are the supreme aim of the society and the state. This definition expresses the core of our democratic pact and guides the way we are linked to the inter-American system and to international instruments of human rights, of which Peru is part and parcel. Peru today reaffirms its willingness to continue to work to consolidate an inter-American, more accessible system, one that is closer to the victims and one that is more effective when it comes to prevention of violations of human rights. With this spirit, we renew our commitment for respectful and open dialogue in the true belief that the defense of all human beings is the best basis of peace, justice, and prosperity in the Americas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Peru, for your comments. St. Kitts and Nevis has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished Excellencies and worthy alternates, Secretariat, Observer Missions. With the highest appreciation to the delegations that have called for this important subject matter to form part of the agenda today, December 10, 2025, the government and people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis join the international community in commemorating International Human Rights Day, reaffirming our unwavering commitment to the principles of dignity, equality, and justice for all. Our federation proudly aligns itself with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the core international and inter-American human rights conventions and treaties that give life to these principles. These instruments affirm that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and they guide our national efforts to strengthen democratic governance, uphold the rule of law, and promote inclusive development. As a small island developing state, St. Kitts and Nevis is acutely aware of the unique vulnerabilities faced by our people and by our sister SIDS globally. We therefore reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding the rights of the poor and otherwise marginalized and vulnerable, including Afro-descendants and indigenous peoples, to advancing the rights and well-being of children, protecting and empowering women and girls, and ensuring the full inclusion, accessibility, and participation of persons with disabilities in all aspects of national life. These are not privileges, Chair, but fundamental entitlements owed to every individual as a child of the earth. My delegation further emphasizes that all human beings must be valued and respected, and that their contributions, regardless of circumstances, status, gender, ability, or origin, are essential to the strength and sustainability of all democratic societies. On this International Human Rights Day, St. Kitts and Nevis renews its pledge to recognize, respect, and protect the rights and dignity ascribed to all under the relevant United Nations, Inter-American, and other international accords. We remain resolute in our pursuit of a society where human beings are not only proclaimed, the rights of human beings are not only proclaimed, but lived daily, where justice is accessible, where opportunity is inclusive, and where no one is left behind. My delegation closes with the sustained hope that this day would serve not only as a moment of reflection, Chair, but as a renewed call for action, collectively and individually, to uphold the shared values that bind our humanity in securing a more just, equitable, and compassionate world for present and future generations. I thank you again, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, St. Kitts and Nevis. Permanent Observer, Spain has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm taking the floor on the day of commemorating the International Human Rights Day here at the Permanent Council to express Spain's commitment. I truly appreciate the panelists and their presentations. We share their concerns. Spain began our mandate as a member of the Council of Human Rights for 2025 to 2027 with a renewed view towards multilateralism and the work of the United Nations. As a member of ECTER, we have taken on the responsibility to shore up the efficacy of the international system for the protection of human rights. From the Council's standpoint, we are promoting lines of action related to equality between men and women, the fight against all forms of discrimination, especially given sexual orientation and gender identity, the protection of rights of people with disabilities, the promotion of economic rights, social and cultural rights included, as well as the defense of people who defend human rights, recognizing their role as change agents. Furthermore, our country has an ambassador on a special mission for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law that shores up our capacity to dialogue and follow the agenda. This work is also carried out by the ambassador and the special mission with special policies and in the hands of the new special ambassador for LGBTQ policies alongside the cooperation of the Equal Rights Coalition of Spain. And then lastly, Spain in the OAS firmly backs the Inter-American System of Human Rights here at the OAS, the ICHR, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. We recognize the main role played when it comes to protecting human rights. I would like to particularly mention the support of the PODESCA rapporteurship. This support is translated into institutional and financial ongoing cooperation. And we go along with all of the efforts to strengthen the monitoring and access to justice, as well as the other mechanisms established to provide recognition of the memory of justice and reparation for any victims. Spain is a trustworthy society that will continue to defend foreign policy with its own identity based on respect for international humanitarian law and human rights. And we will continue to demand compliance with the same conviction in all corners of the world. We say that human rights is the bedrock of democratic life. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. The observer mission of France has the floor. Thank you very much. Colleagues, today, the International Day of Human Rights, I'm very happy to participate at this time in the Permanent Council to commemorate the adoption in 1948 of the Universal Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man. This is a fundamental text which crystallizes the indivisible rights and human rights. And this year, we celebrate the 50th year of the Convention of the Mechanism of Human Rights. These issues in the European Union remind us that the defense of human rights is crucial. These are renewed commitments in the world, and these are the contributions and the fundamental rights for the rule of law. And we are looking at our collective work. The Commission in France commemorates this, and we will go along with all of the work that is necessary in the Congress. France defends these rights based on freedom and life and supports the prize to Mrs. Machado from Venezuela for the Nobel Peace Prize. This distinction represents the courage, and once again, we express our solidarity with Venezuela, and we hope that we can take on dialogue to find a democratic solution. France supports the human rights situation, the ICHR, and the mission, and we go along with a lot of different projects to fight against exploitation, cultural promotion of rights, which look to overturn discrimination. This translates for us into work that defends the defenders of human rights throughout the entire world. And we do this with conviction for human rights, and we support the work of the ICHR with our cooperation. France would like to look at the Égalité Fraternité Prize, underscoring human rights as an example, and we commend the Colombian Foundation Empoderamiento para Mujeres, underscoring human rights. When it comes to human rights, we're talking about freedoms. There are no borders. This is universal, and we will continue to do this work and underscore these values. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a Francia.
Thank you very much, France. Our final speaker will be the Holy See.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Holy See thanks you for including this topic on the agenda of this Permanent Council to commemorate the International Day of Human Rights. This day is celebrated every December 10th, and it invites us to think about a milestone for humanity that was begun in 1948 with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations General Assembly. This reminds us of the importance of that document, which Pope Leo stated, and I quote, "The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is today part of the cultural heritage of mankind and can always guide human beings in their inalienable dignity as we constantly seek the truth, returning dignity to those who do not feel respected in the most intimate of their being, of their consciousness." End quote. In a hemispheric context marked by persistent challenges such as inequality, poverty, violence, migration, forced migration, that is, trafficking in persons, and the cultural erosion of valuing human life, we need to reiterate the fact that human beings are at the very center and their role cannot be replaced. When we commemorate the International Day of Human Rights, the Holy See allows itself to highlight among the rights enshrined in the Magna Carta these fundamental freedoms: the essential right to freedom of thought and religion or belief. This is stipulated in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration, as well as in Article 3 of the Inter-American Declaration, in Article 12 of the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights. These positive values that stem from faith are an immense source of goodness and truth for the life of individuals and communities. That is what drives us to continuing to move forward as we promote and protect this right in our region. Chair, the delegation of the Holy See believes that this framework is appropriate to promote the fact that dignity of all human beings is at the very heart of all of our regulatory frameworks and public policies in the hemisphere, promoting their integral development, protecting the most vulnerable, and fomenting peaceful coexistence based on truth, justice, freedom, and reciprocal respect. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to the Holy See for your interventions. I see no more requests for the floor, and therefore, once again, I will express our gratitude to the President of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, Jose Luis Caballero, to the President of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, Judge Nancy Hernandez, to the Director of the Program for the Andean, North American, and Caribbean region of Sahel, Florencia Reggiardo, for your participation in this commemoration. Thank you to all of the delegations that have intervened as well on this item. I suggest that the Permanent Council take note of the presentations and interventions, which will be noted in the record of today's session. If there are no objections, it is hereby agreed. Moving on to the next item on the order of business with regard to another commemoration, which is also very important. As the next item on the order of business, and following a request sent by the delegations of Panama, Brazil, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay, we will now commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. With this in mind, I'm delighted to greet Mercedes Carrillo from the Department of Access to Rights for the Secretariat for Strengthening Democracies at the OAS. Dr. Betty Le Munoz Pagosian was originally slated to be with us today, but she was unable to join us due to a scheduling conflict. And so I would like to now give the floor to Mercedes Carrillo to begin the presentation. I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Tomas Pascual, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Chile, and Chair of the Permanent Council. Mr. Secretary for Strengthening Democracy, Sebastian Karaljevic, Honorable Member States. The Department of Access to Rights of the Secretariat for Strengthening Democracy is grateful for this space to commemorate the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, proclaimed as such by the United Nations General Assembly on the 14th of October, 1992. And this year, the motto is building inclusive cities to promote social inclusion. Persons with disabilities are about 15% of the population in LAC, and this includes those who suffer from physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory disabilities, and they face many different barriers which may prevent their full participation in society on equal footing with others. But what are these hurdles exactly? These hurdles include, for example, economic inequalities, limitations in access to services and opportunities, low representation in political life in their countries, a lack of accessibility in public facilities, unequal salaries in the same position, restrictions in decision-making, discriminatory attitudes and obstacles for their comprehensive general development. In the World Forum on Disabilities, they are confirming the sad reality. Persons with disabilities are overrepresented in figures for poverty and extreme poverty. Within our organization, member states have understood that regional development can only be achieved when everyone in the Americas, particularly those who are living in greater situations of vulnerability, are able to exercise their fundamental freedoms on equal footing when it comes to education, healthcare, work, mobility, independent living, legal capacity, access to justice, access to information, just to name a few. And in order to drive this objective, the OAS has developed many different legal tools through which member states are able to reiterate their commitments to fighting poverty and extreme poverty, eliminating any form of discrimination, including racial, ethnic, gender, and for disability, to promote human rights and citizens' participation. These instruments specifically include the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, known as CIADIS, and the Program for Designing the Americas for the Rights and Dignity of Persons with Disabilities. But we must also remember the commitments shouldered in the Inter-American Conventions on Women, the Elderly, as well as those adopted for the elimination of all forms of discrimination and intolerance. This includes discrimination for racial reasons adopted at the OAS, and this in a cross-cutting fashion includes persons with disabilities. From the Secretariat for Strengthening Democracy through its Department of Access to Rights, we work hand in hand with member states in order to move forward in our commitments established in those international treaties. And in that sense, I'm very proud to share with all of you that the monitoring process for our cities is in its final phase, having completed throughout this year the phases for presenting reports, delivering and expanding on those reports, convening with civil society for the presenting of those reports and their alternatives. And more recently, last November, we were able to successfully culminate the sessions on verbal defense of these national reports, which were held throughout the month of November. We were very pleased with participation from 45 experts from CITES and 15 member states. Soon we will be delivering to each member state of CITES that took part in this exercise their reports with recommendations from CITES, and we will be celebrating the 14th regular period of sessions in Uruguay in March of 2026. All of this information has been compiled in those reports, and it will be therefore systematized in our Regional Observatory on Disabilities, which is a pioneering initiative from the OAS. This will serve as a repository for the most complete data available in the Americas on persons with disabilities. From this coordinating and technical assistance role, we are delighted with the commemoration of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and we reiterate our openness to continuing to work hand in hand with all member states and organizations from civil society of and for persons with disabilities and their family members to continue building mechanisms for international cooperation, fora for exchanging of experience, spaces for raising awareness, and opportunities for strengthening capacities for the design and adaptation of policies aimed at building more inclusive societies. Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Carrillo, for your intervention. Now, I am delighted to salute and give the floor to Nicholas Scarella, who is the first Vice Chair of the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, and the former National Secretary for the System of Care and Disability in the Ministry of Social Development in Uruguay. Mr. Scarella will be with us virtually, and I therefore give you the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Distinguished members of the Permanent Council, representatives of member states, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to take part in this session as the first Vice Chair of the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities. This is the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and it was included in today's order of business at the request of several different permanent missions and has support from the Permanent Council. Thank you very much for allowing us to take part in this very prestigious forum. Every December 10th, the international community remembers an essential and ongoing commitment that it shouldered. This is ensuring the human rights of persons with disabilities, no more and no less. This is a day that convenes on all of us to reflect on the fact that dignity, equal opportunities, and full effective participation are not simply abstract ideas, but rather concrete commitments that states must guarantee. The motto chosen this year, and that is building inclusive cities to promote social inclusion, is a clear reflection of the spirit of that commemoration. This isn't just with the idea of promoting policies aimed at promoting inclusion, but rather to recognize the central role played by persons with disabilities, or that they should play, as agents of change, as social leaders and active participants in our democracies. The region has made enormous strides. The Americas have robust legal frameworks and policies sensitive to human diversity. We recognize that national experiences shown real transformations in education, employment, accessibility, and autonomy. In this process, the activities for designing the Americas for rights and activities of persons with disabilities has been key in forging this path ahead, understanding the human rights approach in its link to social development. But this advancement continues to face persistent challenges, and millions of persons continue to face physical, cultural, and digital barriers, limiting their effective participation on equal footing. There are educational gaps, deeply unequal unemployment rates, obstacles when it comes to accessing public life, a deficit in accessible infrastructure which restricts opportunities. Commemorating today invites us all to look at those gaps and shortcomings and feel a sense of responsibility. This is not just a beautiful speech, it is an ethical commitment to strengthen not only the lives of persons with disabilities, but also the quality of democracy in our entire region. A society that excludes or limits is a society that is giving up on part of their own potential. That is why it's fundamental for us to promote environments that ensure real participation of persons with disabilities in decision-making. It's not enough for us to just talk about mandates, but rather we need to think about how people need to lead the design and execution as well as the evaluation of public policies on persons with disabilities. This goes hand in hand with the principle that has historically led the disability movement, which states that none of us without all of us. This approach reiterates the legitimacy of public policy decisions and the need for more inclusive decisions. From there, we reiterate our commitment to ensuring full implementation of the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, and the Program of Action for the Design of the Americas. Our proposal is that we support member states in reconciling public policies to guarantee universal access, autonomy, inclusive education, and, generally speaking, the elimination of all forms of discrimination. This commemoration allows us and invites us to reflect on the importance of reiterating our political commitment to human rights, deepening inclusion, closing persistent gaps, and strengthening effective participation and the leadership of persons with disability in public life. May this International Day reiterate our commitment with the exercise of human rights driving activities that consolidate equality, eliminate barriers, and ensure effective participation of persons with disabilities in our societies. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Scarella, for your intervention. Thank you to both panelists for introducing this topic, which is, of course, extremely pertinent for the development of rights of persons in the Americas and the world. And I'd like to give the floor to delegations that wish to take part in this commemoration. First of all, I'll give the floor to the Panamanian delegation. Thank you very much, Chair. Please allow me to begin expressing my sincere thanks to all of our panelists for their valuable interventions. Thank you for their leadership in promoting access to rights and the inclusion of pillars for strengthening democracy in our region. And also thank you very much to Nicholas Scarella, whose experience in care, accessibility, and the fight against discrimination provides us with essential reference points to continue moving forward. Today, we commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This is a date proclaimed by the United Nations to promote dignity, rights, and the well-being of this group. This year, under the motto, Building Inclusive Cities to Drive Social Inclusion, invites us all to recognize not only the needs of persons with disabilities, but also their fundamental role as agents of change, leaders, and active participants in building fairer, more democratic societies. This approach is particularly relevant for our region. The Inter-American System of Human Rights, and in particular the OAS, has underscored that disabilities are an issue of human rights and full exercise of sovereignty. Moving forward toward more inclusive societies means, therefore, eliminating barriers, opening spaces for participation, and ensuring that persons with disabilities not only benefit from public policies, but also are active participants in their design and execution. In Panama, this commitment is reflected in our recent advancements, and I'd like to share some of those with you briefly. Over the last several years, we have strengthened our legal framework and public policies, and that includes reforms of our civil code to eliminate pejorative terms and modernize language with an approach focused on dignity and respect. We've also strengthened our constitution with our strategic plan from Senatis, which allows us to promote workshops on independent living, ensuring universal access, and promoting awareness at the national level. The recent poll, NDIS 2, which notes that 18% of the Panamanian population today lives with some form of disability, provides a fundamental technical foundation in order to guide our public decision-making with more accuracy. When it comes to services, Panama continues to expand its network for comprehensive rehabilitation, ensuring multidisciplinary care and specialized therapies. At the same time, the Ministry of Labor has been driving programs for labor inclusion with real programs for access to dignified work on equal footing. We've also strengthened policies for certification to provide training programs and move forward in accessibility, both digitally and physically, within public institutions, thus strengthening independence and full participation of children and adults with disabilities. These efforts are complemented by regional mandates, and that includes a call of action for the design of the Americas for rights and dignity of persons with disabilities 2016-2026. This is a key tool for moving toward full inclusion in our region. However, we also share the awareness that there are still major gaps ahead when it comes to employment, education, accessibility, and democratic participation. That is why, Chair, the topic of this year reminds us all that social progress is impossible if we don't ensure full inclusion of those who have historically faced the greatest barriers. Chair, distinguished colleagues, as we commemorate this day today, we reiterate the Hemispheric commitment to shedding light on the leadership of persons with disabilities, sharing best practices, promoting accessibility at the universal level, and ensuring regional compliance in order to eliminate cultural, physical, and digital hurdles. On behalf of the Republic of Panama, I reiterate our determination to move forward to being a country where inclusion is a reality every single day, where diversity is recognized as a strength, and where every person is able to fully exercise his or her rights and thus contribute to national development. Thank you very much once again to our panelists and everyone present for your commitment to this cause. This means that everything that this means for our democracies and our society. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Chile. Thank you very much, Chair. For Chile, this commemoration is particularly meaningful as it is an opportunity for us to share best practices and reflections on how to move forward toward being more inclusive, fair societies. Though we have a simple response as far as what is the right path ahead, we believe that that path must be built with participation from all inhabitants of our states, without exclusion. As we have noted on many different occasions, in Chile we recognize that promoting and protecting human rights for all individuals is an ongoing effort. We are never fully done. Our diversity reminds us every single day that we must build new spaces for inclusion and break down barriers. Against this backdrop, over the last several years, we have been working to promote advancements that have been very significant, including, for example, the TA law, which provides support in educational and healthcare settings for persons with autism, and the recent amendment to the law on labor inclusion from 2024, which now requires a quota of 2% hiring persons with disabilities in the public sector as well as major corporations. Similarly, we reiterate the national policy for care support guided by persons in situations of dependence to promote the right to receive appropriate and dignified care and support throughout the national territory. However, Chair, inclusion isn't limited to regulatory frameworks and public policies. As noted by President Boric during the commemoration of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, first of all, people have the right to live with dignity. This is a principle that the state must guarantee. We must be aware that there is a long road ahead, but in Chile we continue to drive public policies to strengthen autonomy, support, and the rights of persons with disabilities, to eliminate the barriers that they face and ensure their full and effective participation in social, economic, and political life. We do this with the conviction that inclusion is not just a speech. This is a sine qua non condition for democracy, development, and the dignity of all human beings. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Chile for that intervention. And now we recognize Colombia. Thank you very much, Chair. This is also a very important topic for Colombia, as Chile just described, and that is why I'd like to thank you very much for the presentations, Mercedes Carrillo and Dr. Munoz, as well as Mr. Scarella. We are commemorating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and this year the motto is Building Inclusive Societies to Drive Social Progress. This reminds us that persons with disabilities are not just beneficiaries of public policies, rather they should be recognized as active participants and agents of change, as well as decision makers themselves. I just heard Chile say this as well, and in Colombia we have the initial law 351, which provides the opportunity for those who are hiring workers to ensure that up to 10% to get hire 10% person with disabilities. So I was very pleased to see that this is an impact that we are seeing. We see the same figures for hiring persons with disability. When they hire more than 10% of persons with disabilities, they are able to receive corresponding benefits. And I'm very pleased to see that this is happening. When our president was the mayor of Bogota, we were able to achieve 23 court rulings from the Constitutional Court on this topic. Hitherto, it had not been implemented, but it is now being carried out every single day under the administration of President Petro. Today, we are commemorating important progress made, and recently we had a visit from the Special Rapporteur from the United Nations on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We presented and sustained the fourth report before the Committee on Eliminating All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities at the OAS, CEDIS. And our Congress also adopted the bill on the optional protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities. These milestones all reflect a sustained commitment to accessibility and equal opportunity. However, we are highly aware that, as we've heard today, there are still persistent and significant shortcomings in the region, as we have just heard from Nicolas, in the area of education that's inclusive, as well as infrastructure, employment, accessibility, democratic participation, and protection from discrimination. That is why we underscore the fundamental role played by the OAS and the Program of Action for the Design of the Americas for the rights and dignity of persons with disability 2016-2026 as our strategic guide for public policies and regional cooperation. During our chairmanship of the group of countries Friends of Persons with Disability, Colombia insisted on the need to build real spaces for leadership, effective participation, and inclusion. This is not just a symbolic gesture. It's also not an act of good faith. It is an obligation when it comes to human rights. It is a pillar of strong democracies and more humane societies. This is a principle that guided our declarations, events, and activities presented by the group under our chairmanship. Chair, I'd like to conclude by calling on OAS member states to renew their commitment to full participation, programs promoting accessibility, inclusivity, as well as participation of persons with disabilities in decision-making. The Americas will only advance if everyone, with no exception, is able to fully exercise his or her rights and contribute to collective progress. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your intervention. I give the floor to the Dominican Republic. Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the valuable reflections, both from Ms. Carrillo as well as from Mr. Scarella. And as we commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we underscore our commitment to building a fairer, more inclusive, and accessible society in which all individuals are able to fully exercise their rights and develop their life projects without barriers and with dignity. This year, the motto of the commemoration, already mentioned here, that is, building inclusive societies for social progress, invites all of us to consider diversity as a source of wealth and to remember that disabilities doesn't define a person. That is why we need to continue working to eliminate physical, social, cultural, and behavioral hurdles that prevent effective participation of so many millions of persons that live with disabilities around the world. In this sense, we reiterate our will to promote programs, policies, and activities to ensure equal opportunity, universal access to education, employment, healthcare, culture, and technology. Similarly, we underscore our commitment to respecting dignity and the independence and human rights of persons with disability in line with the Constitution of the Republic, Law number 513 on persons with disabilities, and the international instruments ratified by the Dominican Republic. We would like to underscore here in the report from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights on the situation of rights of persons with disabilities in the Americas, a concept reference point that allows us to consider profound reforms and ensure sustainable development here. And therefore, we underscore the program of action for the design of the Americas for rights and dignity of persons with disabilities 2016 to 2026. This was adopted in 2016 in my country at the General Assembly of this very organization. The program is a regional instrument for promoting full inclusion, equal opportunities, and respect for human rights of persons with disabilities, guiding our efforts as we build more accessible and equitable societies. For countries that are moving forward on our national policies, such as the Dominican Republic, these prerogatives at the regional level are a guideline and framework that's priceless as it guides our National Plan 2025-2035 on disabilities and ensure that we respond to established international standards, placing persons with disabilities at the very heart of our public actions. This plan is a milestone as for the very first time it establishes a comprehensive roadmap that's coordinated and sustainable, ensuring full implementation of the Convention on Human Rights of Persons with Disabilities in our country. From the Dominican government, and particularly through our National Council on Disability, the DR continues to develop actions that ensure that no one is left behind in consolidating a government where rights for almost 20,000 people certified with some sort of disability are respected. During the last year, we have moved forward in strengthening our new public policies and substantial reforms aimed along these lines. And we underscore expanding accessibility programs in public institutions, implementation of programs for labor integration, and universal design criteria in state and government, and as well as urban design, and also teacher training and technology for supporting student development. It's necessary for us to include these collective efforts and ensure that we all are able to lead this change. Chair, this is a date that is the ideal opportunity for us to recognize the progress achieved and at the same time renew our efforts aimed at strengthening full inclusion and equity for persons with disability. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, embajadora, por su...
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your comments. El Salvador has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. El Salvador echoes with conviction and would like to celebrate this International Day of People with Disability with a renewed commitment to the call to have all societies be inclusive so that we can have social progress. Recognizing people with disabilities as stewards when it comes to putting together public policies and in decision-making in all spheres of social life. As a state party of BPAC, El Salvador concluded successfully its fourth cycle of follow-ups, reaffirming with this fact its own commitment to the principles of non-discrimination and dignity. We truly appreciate the Committee of Experts and the Department of Access to Rights for all of their technical work in this process. Mr. Chairman, I would like to underscore some of the national progress made in this very important topic. For the very first time, very explicitly, at the 7th census of the population and the 6th for households of 2024, we had a milestone in including measuring disabilities according to standards of the Huachitukon group, with results that indicate that the 4.9% of our population has some kind of disability. This allows us to strengthen the baseline to design public policies with a focus on rights, accessibility, and inclusion. El Salvador has developed comprehensive policies that look at the construction of more inclusive societies that are more equal to achieve social progress for people with disabilities. Now, when it comes to education, we are moving towards a system that guarantees access and inclusive learning by slashing structural and social barriers within the normative framework, which we want to strengthen. We have to consolidate a model for access, support technology, and specialized information. Also, when it comes to employment, we promote labor inclusion of people with disabilities via programs and coordinated activities with the Ministry of Employment with a view to strengthening competencies and to fill in the productive sectors. We have political participation, encourage political participation of people with disabilities, implementing measures to have the full-fledged exercise of their right to vote. This is done through accessible information, adequate infrastructure, voting at home, voting by distance, and a portable ballot. El Salvador has been declared a first family-friendly country in the world with museums and cultural spaces that have universal access. And our national library is a regional point of reference when it comes to inclusion. Mr. Chairman, we truly believe that the progress promoted in our state should also be reflected in our organization. And that is why we encourage continuing efforts to strengthen accessibility here in installations in the OAS, in this building and in the Museum of the Americas, as well as to promote greater incorporation of people with disabilities on the staff of this organization. Panelists on activities in the inter-American systems in general. That should be the case. El Salvador reaffirms its commitment to tirelessly work both on the national level as well as within the framework of this organization so that nobody is discriminated against because of their disability, and so that human dignity is the bedrock of development in the Americas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments. Brazil has the floor. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate the presentations and their very important contributions of the panelists. Brazil commends the celebration of the International Day of People with Disabilities and truly appreciates the mission of Panama for their leadership in this area. I would like to take this opportunity to renew the commitments and underscore progress, as well as recognize the challenges that still are there. The promotion of rights of people with disabilities needs a cross-cutting approach and coordinated work from the state and civil society. It also calls for international cooperation that allows for having an exchange of good practices and strengthening policies based on evidence. The Brazilian government actively participated in activities of the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against People with Disabilities. It says we would like to commend the Department of Access here at the OAS and all other member states for their successful cycle of monitoring in compliance with the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against People with Disabilities, CAB. Brazil reaffirms its commitment to promote a more accessible and inclusive society for people with disabilities. In the last few years, we have undertaken concerted efforts to include social education, educational, labor, and technological inclusion of people with disabilities. We underscore of these initiatives the National Plan for Rights for People with Disabilities. No limits there. The human rights for all citizens led to a host of different actions, as well as handing over technical laboratories, medicine, and research institutes in all regions throughout Brazil. We had buses for access to education and multisensorial classrooms for neurodivergent students in places where they work and go to school. We have different agencies of the state to promote physical and digital age areas that are more accessible with public services for schools and for the media. Socially, we have refined our support for families, and we have care policies guaranteeing that people with disabilities have access to adequate services for healthcare, social assistance, and rehabilitation. We pay special attention to the inclusion of children and adolescents with disabilities, ensuring their full-fledged participation in educational arenas and promoting areas for combating any kind of discrimination. Social participation is crucial for our national policies. The National Council for People with Disabilities is a government that unites the government and civil society when it comes to monitoring and evaluation of public policies, guaranteeing that the people with disabilities themselves contribute to decisions that concern them. On this International Day for People with Disabilities, Brazil renews its commitment to build societies that are truly initiative, in which all people can exercise their rights free of barriers and discrimination. We will continue to work to advance the implementation of all the commitments to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brazil, for your comments. Argentina has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I would like to express our thanks to the distinguished delegation of Panama for having spearheaded the initiative to celebrate this International Day of People with Disabilities in this Permanent Council and all the sponsors. We have an historic commitment which is renewed to protect human rights for people with disabilities. Our country is part of the Convention on Rights of People with Disabilities of the United Nations and the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against People with Disabilities. These are normative pillars to guide our public policies. I would also like to underscore in particular the Argentina's commitment to the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against People with Disabilities here at the OAS. This committee is a technical, political key space to advance when it comes to the effective implementation of the Inter-American Convention, sharing experiences, good practices, and challenges amongst states parties. In this context, we are very happy to underscore that Argentina has presented its fourth national report to SETI. This report reflects the work carried out by our country when it comes to areas such as inclusive education, access to health care under equal conditions, labor inclusion in the public and private sectors, universal access to justice, living independently and without institutions, political and social participation, as well as international cooperation and risk management for disasters with a view to disabilities. Our report looks at the coordination of people with disabilities, and we do this in the provinces with civil society. This strengthens their legitimacy and their federal character. I would also like to underscore the role played by SETI as a space in which Argentina not only is accountable but also learns from the experiences of other states and offers its own experiences when it comes to certification of disabilities, technical support programs, policies for rehabilitation based on the community, actions for electoral accessibility measures to guarantee the legal capacity for people with disabilities in keeping with our civil society and our commercial frameworks. Here I should like to thank the Department for Access to Rights in the OAS as Technical Secretariat of SETI, going along permanently with technical support, and the coordination offered by that department have been crucial and fundamental for the report cycles and the activities of horizontal cooperation which are carried out in SETI. In this commemoration, then, the Argentine Republic reaffirms a commitment to continue to participate actively in SETI and in all the other spaces in the OAS, and will continue to accompany all of the regional efforts that seek to eliminate discrimination and remove barriers so that people with disabilities can exercise their rights. We will contribute with all their potential, and we want them to consider with all their potentiality in all societies. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Argentina. St. Lucia has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. St. Lucia is honored to join in the observance of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We do so mindful of the global mandate first advanced by the United Nations and strengthened through the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which calls for nothing less than the full recognition of dignity, autonomy, equal opportunity, and meaningful participation for every person. The theme, Fostering Disability-Inclusive Societies for Advancing Social Progress, is a recognition that persons with disabilities are not passive recipients of policy, but leaders, advocates, innovators, and citizens whose voices must shape the decisions that guide our region. Their right to participate in every sphere of public life is a guarantee owed to them under both international legal frameworks and our shared commitment to human rights. The Permanent Council's commemoration today calls us to reflect on lessons from across the hemisphere, to promote policies that enhance autonomy and inclusive education, and to strengthen cooperation so that no community remains unseen or unheard. St. Lucia welcomes this approach. We believe that inclusion fortifies democracy. A society is only as strong as the extent to which all its people can contribute and lead. Chair, I also wish to bring to the Council's attention the national efforts recently undertaken in St. Lucia. Our Ministry of Home Affairs, Crime Prevention, and Persons with Disabilities, in collaboration with the Ministry of Equity and many organizations representing persons with disabilities, established a working committee to coordinate activities for this observance. This year, we hosted exhibitions, public education programs, national broadcasts highlighting lived experiences, and creative expressions led by persons with disabilities and their allies. We continue to expand public sensitization through a series of televised messages designed to strengthen understanding of disability, respect, dignity, and encourage an inclusive national culture. These efforts reflect our conviction that inclusion continues to be what we practice. It is our way of governance and nation building which recognizes people not through the lens of limitation, but through capability, resilience, and contribution. As we commemorate this day, St. Lucia reaffirms its support for regional cooperation, for the continued implementation of the Program of Action for the Decade of the Americas, for the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities, and for the strengthening of mechanisms that elevate participation at all decision-making levels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, St. Lucia. Costa Rica has the floor. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We would like to begin by thanking the Permanent Mission of Panama and the states that went along with the request for including this item, including Costa Rica, and having this item on the agenda of the Permanent Council. We also would like to thank the panelists for their presentations. Today, we remember that since 1992, the international community that celebrates the International Day of Persons with Disabilities with the aim to promote their rights, to strengthen their well-being, and to make visible the challenges that still exist to guarantee their full-fledged participation in society. The Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, with the Program of Action for the Decade of the Americas, 2016 to 2026, are the political legal framework that undergird making the region more inclusive, more accessible. The motto this year, to promote inclusive societies, to promote social progress, invites us to recognize the role played by people with disabilities as change agents, promoters of decisions, and those who steward public policies. From the Inter-American system, these principles are reaffirmed every year through participation, autonomy, and accessibility and these are indispensable for sustainable development. Costa Rica would like to underscore initiatives that have taken on their commitment in Costa Rica in the area of human rights. We have a advisory committee for follow-up and implementation of the international obligations headed up by our ministry. This space allows organizations of civil society, including representing people with disabilities, to help draft public policies for more inclusive and representative governance. When it comes to employment, we continue to spearhead in cooperation with others for people with disabilities. We do this with institutions, public institutions in the private sector, and international organizations. This is complemented with initiatives such as the National Strategy for Human Talent, which makes a priority people with disabilities, young people, for accessible labor or work opportunities. We truly believe that access to employment is a sine qua non for personal autonomy, participation in the community, and a reduction of inequality. When it comes to the digital sphere, Costa Rica making progress through implementation of accessibility in public sector networks to ensure that all persons without any distinction can have access to services and programs as well as tools of the state. This process is complemented with training of public people with accessible documents, which contributes to eliminating barriers and strengthens access to information. Mr. Chairman, for Costa Rica, disability is a question of human rights, equality, and full-fledged citizenship, and that is why we recognize SETI's work. This process with national reports have allowed us to improve follow-up mechanism and strengthen the responses after the pandemic. This contributes to more updated public policies and makes them very visible for all. We would also like to seize this opportunity to refer to the importance that this organization has as it moves towards full-fledged accessibility to the building. Services and processes are here to guarantee dignified participation with dignity for all people, as Costa Rica has mentioned earlier. Today, we reaffirm our commitment to continue building societies where no one is left behind, where diversity is a value, and where dignity of all people is the point of departure for all public activity. This will be possible if we make it such that these are real principles, practice, and are cross-cutting in all of our decisions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Costa Rica. Mexico has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mexico would like to sincerely thank the contributions of the panelists, and we are reminded that an International Day of People with Disabilities is an affirmation that inclusion is not just an ethic principle, rather an indispensable condition for sustainable development, democracy, and social progress, as suggested by the motto selected by the United Nations this year. Mexico reaffirms its commitment to move towards areas that are free of discrimination or violence, with intersectional approaches that make it possible to exercise human rights without any physical barriers, any cultural, communication, or digital barriers for all people. Today, we recognize and we advocate for the continued visibility for those that live with some kind of disability, and as much as their contributions in decision-making spaces are essential for designing policies that adequately meet the different realities in our region. We reaffirm our commitment for the full-fledged implementation of the Inter-American Convention for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities, and with the pillars of inclusive education, accessibility across the board, technological innovation, and personal autonomy. Mexico is moving ahead in having economic inclusion with policies such as pensions for well-being of people with disabilities, and that hits about 1.5 million people thus far. The Supreme Court of Justice of the nation has issued criteria that is relevant, such as quashing interdiction, to guarantee legal capacity for people with persons, and there are rulings and procedures to ensure full-fledged adequate defense thereof. The Mexican state has strengthened access for medical care for millions of people with disabilities. In addition to other significant achievements, let me underscore that 100% of all of the medical units of the Institute of Social Security and Social Services for workers of the state now have architecture, whilst the Mexican Institute for Social Security has ramps and different bars and personnel with basic language or sign language so that we can adequately attend and give care to persons with disabilities. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your comments. Uruguay has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Uruguay truly appreciates the Republic of Panama for having taken the initiative to include this ceremony for commemorating persons with disabilities. We would like to renew our commitment for full-fledged inclusion of persons with disabilities. In this framework, then, we would also like to thank recognition offered by Uruguay to be the headquarters of the 14th Conference for Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Persons with Disabilities, SEDI. This will take place in Montevideo in March 2026. This meeting will allow us to approve the reports on implementation of the Inter-American Convention for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities and the Program of Action for the Americas, as well as to elect new authorities and promote an exchange of experiences amongst member states. In moving to the meeting, for us, it's not just a question of offering a headquarters, but rather to strengthen hemispheric cooperation and share challenges and achievements, and our move towards eliminating all forms of discrimination for people with disabilities, and underscore the role that Uruguay plays in human rights in the region. Mr. Chairman, I would like to underscore very briefly some of the progress that has been made. This is recent that are within the policy of a modern inclusive policy geared towards having autonomy for all people. On the International Day of Persons with Disability on the 3rd of December, the President of the Republic presented the foundation for building the first national plan for visibility and rights of persons with disabilities in Uruguay without barriers. The national plan is structured around the pillars of the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities and incorporates recommendations of the United Nations Committee, the context of which will be Uruguay. The main focus will be results-oriented to fill in the gaps and improve quality of life. Of the main lines of action, let me underscore implementation of a national guideline for disability education, along with the National Ministry of Education and facilitators for autonomy in educational centers. The creation of a rehabilitation center in the northern part of the country has underscored and implemented active technology for Uruguay. There is the Chacon Institute, which deals with visual disability throughout the entire country, incorporation of accessibility when it comes to departments and municipalities. The new national program for accessible housing, accessible tourism, and the creation of a specialized unit for autism in the Ministry of Social Development. As such, we are broadening our scope for the national system of care with the support of different people and personalized approaches geared towards independent life, prioritizing the autonomy of people with disabilities and or eliminating unnecessary organizations. So the next city meeting is an opportunity. It's a strategic one to strengthen the Inter-American system, to share good practices and take on persistent challenges such as digital accessibility and the many forms of discrimination that women, children, and senior citizens confront, people who live far from the capital and the rural areas. We are fully committed to the human rights system in the Americas, and we truly believe that inclusion is the basis for more democratic and just societies. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Uruguay. Paraguay has the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Please allow me at the outset to thank the Panamanian delegation through their representative, Ana Irene, for including this topic on today's order of business, as well as the other co-sponsoring countries. And in Paraguay, the recent entry into force of Law 771 of 2025, the legal framework included a new paradigm being adopted when it comes to the legal capacity of persons with disabilities, reivindicating their full legal personality, independence, and right to take part on equal footing in society. This is a substantial step forward in removing stereotypes and barriers with a human rights approach when it comes to promoting political, civil, and social rights of persons with disabilities. This new legal framework modified the provisions of the Civil Code and the Code on the Legal Association in line with international standards and agreements shouldered by Paraguay, the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, ratified in 2022. And in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, ratified in 2008. Without prejudice to this advancement, in 2015, Paraguay had already harmonized our legislation and structure with the creation of the National Secretariat of Human Rights of Persons with Disabilities, SINALIS. This was the beginning of a process of public policies being adopted with the aim of respecting the dignity of persons with disabilities in Paraguay. Please allow me to also highlight along those lines the creation of the National Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CONADIS, a mixed instance comprised of official institutions and civil society organizations made up for and by persons with disabilities. With the new law, they will become the guiding entity to ensure inclusive policies and the coordination of programs, acting as a coordinator of rights, training, and education for persons with disabilities. Chair, from my delegation as a member of the group of countries, Friends of Persons with Disabilities at the OAS, today we reiterate our commitment to continuing to build a hemisphere that's more fair, accessible, and with greater solidarity, in which each person is able to carry out their life plan on equal footing and in dignity. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paraguay. Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Assistant Secretary General, distinguished permanent representatives and observers, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the delegation of Jamaica as we commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, a day that calls on all of us to recommit to the principles of dignity, equality, inclusion, and the inherent worth of every human being. The theme for this year reminds us that societies thrive only when all people are empowered to participate fully. This requires more than recognition of rights. It demands deliberate, sustained action to dismantle structural barriers and to create environments in which persons with disabilities can enjoy the same freedoms, opportunities, and quality of life as others. Jamaica is proud of the strides we continue to make in advancing disability rights, guided by our obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Inter-American Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, and our own national legislative and policy framework. Allow me to highlight several key initiatives currently being undertaken by the government of Jamaica. Implementation of the Disabilities Act of 2022, expansion of social protection and economic empowerment programs, focus on inclusive education, strengthening health and community-based rehabilitation services, national accessibility and infrastructure improvements, advanced national accessibility standards, improve physical infrastructure in government buildings and transport systems, introduce more accessible e-government platforms to ensure persons with disabilities can access public information and services independently. Mr. Chairman, while much progress has been made, we acknowledge that significant work remains. Jamaica remains committed to deepening collaboration with civil society, the private sector, regional partners, and the OAS to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are fully protected and that inclusion becomes an everyday reality. Today, as we honor the resilience, talents, and contributions of persons with disabilities, Jamaica reaffirms its unwavering commitment to building a society where no one is left behind. Let us seize this moment to accelerate action, strengthen partnerships, and uphold the principles of equity and justice that bind us as member states of this hemispheric community. Mr. Chair, I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis.
Thank you, Chair. St. Kitts and Nevis is pleased to join fellow member states in commemorating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities and welcomes the inclusion of this important agenda item. My delegation reaffirms a firm belief that democratic societies are strongest when all citizens, without exception, are enabled to participate fully, meaningfully, and on equal terms in civic, economic, and social life. This principle must extend unequivocally to persons in situations of vulnerability, including persons with disabilities, whose full inclusion remains both a democratic imperative and a development priority. Accession by St. Kitts and Nevis to the Inter-American Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities reflects my nation's enduring commitment to advancing equality of opportunity, safeguarding human dignity, and dismantling the institutional and social barriers that impede inclusive participation. These commitments are further reinforced by the principles enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which continue to guide global and national efforts toward rights-based inclusion. Chair, St. Kitts and Nevis remains resolute in strengthening the enabling environment for persons with disabilities. The government is currently updating our disabilities policy and is in the advanced stages of finalizing a comprehensive disabilities bill, completion of which is shortly anticipated. These initiatives will modernize our legislative and policy frameworks and more firmly entrench disability rights within our national governance architecture. My delegation underscores the important work being carried out by the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Aging and Disabilities in collaboration with the St. Kitts and Nevis Association of Persons with Disabilities. Through sensitization workshops, stakeholder consultations, panel discussions, and sustained community outreach, these efforts have generated increased public awareness, understanding, and support for the important contributions made by persons with disabilities. The government remains convinced that sustained dialogue opens minds, transforms attitudes, and tangibly improves the lives of persons living with disabilities. Recognizing that accessibility must also encompass effective communication, basic training in sign language was conducted earlier this year for frontline workers and civil servants. This initiative strengthens inclusive service delivery and enhances the capacity of public institutions to respond equitably to the needs of all. Recent collaborative initiatives undertaken by the government with civil society also signal a fundamental appreciation for the level of partnership required to drive advancements. A training center established through joint efforts with the St. Kitts and Nevis Association of Persons with Disabilities now provides participation with practical life skills, including financial literacy and estate planning, thereby promoting autonomy, resilience, and long-term empowerment. Additionally, through funding provided by the Green Climate Fund and with substantive support from the Ministry of Agriculture, the association has launched a farming initiative designed to cultivate new economic skills and promote self-reliance among persons with disabilities. This initiative is further complemented by long-standing handicraft programs, collectively offering multiple pathways for social inclusion, entrepreneurship, and independent livelihoods. Mr. Chair, St. Kitts and Nevis reiterates that democratic participation must be inclusive by design and not by exception. My delegation joins others in reaffirming our strong support for strengthened cooperation within the inter-American system to share best practices, enhance institutional capacity, and deepen our collective commitment to the full realization of the rights of persons with disabilities. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias, San Kitts.
Thank you to St. Kitts and Nevis. Guatemala is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. As member of the group of countries Friends of Persons with Disabilities, Guatemala thanks you for introducing this item on the order of business today, as well as for the valuable presentation from the panelists. This commemoration is an opportunity for us to reiterate our regional commitment to the dignity, rights, and full participation of persons with disabilities and move forward toward more truly inclusive societies. Guatemala, with 14 million inhabitants, of which 1.6 million are persons with disabilities, has made inclusion a state policy. President Arevalo has stated very clearly as part of his government's guiding principles, less barriers, more inclusion, because inclusion is a democratic duty. The 2024-2028 government plan incorporates this approach as a cross-cutting access with the idea of reducing inequalities, ensuring universal access, and strengthening public services, driving concrete activities in inclusive education, infrastructure that's adaptable, economic independence, and comprehensive health care, focusing on persons at the very heart of his policies. Against this backdrop, the National Council for Care for Persons with Disabilities, known as CONADI, has intensified its efforts in accessibility, technical assistance, participation of associations of persons with disability, and strengthening the rights approach. In September 1995, we presented to the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities our most recent report, which notes significant advancement in education advancements and interinstitutional coordination. Among the recent initiatives, we have implemented centers for remote care for persons with disabilities that are intellectual in nature and also part of the autism spectrum, ensuring professional support and accessible services with a territorial approach. Similarly, in the various ministries, we have been able to move forward in intersectoral cooperation. We've improved physical accessibility for rehab centers as well. The Ministry of Labor and Welfare, through its various programs, has been able to promote competitive work and decent work as well. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal has implemented measures to ensure accessibility in voting centers, and the Ministry of Culture and Sports has promoted accessibility in cultural, touristic, and athletic facilities. We've been developing inclusive protocols for communication, and various municipalities now have a way to address and treat persons with disabilities, as well as accessibility in coordination with social networks and local governments. Decree 6/2024 on biopsychosocial care, we work to eliminate hurdles and discrimination. And this allows us to ensure we have accurate statistics and data, which allows us to move forward toward a fairer society with less stigmas. This is an issue of human rights, and it requires that we eliminate attitude, behavioral, communication, physical, and digital barriers. And no one can be left behind in public life and the opportunities that are available for all citizens. And we thank the Inter-American System as well as the Program of Action for the Americas of Rights and the Dignity of Persons with Disabilities, whose framework guides our national policies and strengthens regional cooperation. In this spirit, we reiterate our commitment to continuing to collaborate with member states, SETI, this IACHR, and the General Secretary in order to build a region in which everyone, with no exceptions, are able to fully exercise their rights, actively participate, and lead the change toward fairer, more inclusive societies. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Guatemala.
Thank you, Guatemala. Belize.
Chair, the delegation of Belize extends its sincere appreciation to the member states that supported the inclusion of this agenda item and joins the organization in commemorating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities as observed every December 3rd. We also express our gratitude to the distinguished panelists whose insights deepen our collective reflection on the full realization of human rights, including those with disabilities. In Belize, we recognize that persons with disabilities are central to the fabric of our society, contributing to our culture, our communities, and our development aspirations. Ensuring their full participation is not only a matter of rights, but also a necessary foundation for inclusive governance, equitable growth, and the advancement of future generations. We are equally mindful that the barriers persons with disabilities face intersect with broader issues of socioeconomic inequality, public health access, and community safety, requiring coordinated actions across sectors. The Belize Statistical Institute estimates that 11% of Belize's population identifies as having a disability. This figure underscores both the scale of our responsibility and the opportunity before us to build systems that affirm dignity, autonomy, and meaningful participation for all persons, regardless of ability. While progress has been made in strengthening services and expanding national awareness, we must enhance the work necessary to accommodate all persons. Chair, in the spirit of the Ministry of the Ministry of Human Development, Family Support, and Gender Affairs of Belize observed Disability Week from November 30th to December 6th under the global theme, Fostering Disability-Inclusive Societies for Advancing Social Progress. As Belize marks the first anniversary of the Belize Disability Act in 2024, we underscore the significant progress that will soon be realized, including the establishment of the Disability Secretariat, the appointment of the Commission, and near finalization of the Belize Nationality Disability Strategy. The government is also embarking on strengthening coordination with National Emergency Management Organization and the Special Needs Disaster Risk Committee to enhance accessible disaster risk management. Today, as we mark this International Day of Persons with Disabilities, Belize reaffirms its obligations under the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and expresses its continued support for hemispheric cooperation through the OAS to advance inclusion, accessibility, and the elimination of discrimination against persons with disabilities. It is the view of the government of Belize that disability inclusion is not an act of charity, but an act of justice and a necessary pillar of national development. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Belice.
Thank you, Belize. Peru is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Peru would like to echo this commemoration, reiterating our commitment to promoting and protecting the human rights of persons with disabilities. And we believe that a truly democratic society is built based on inclusion and equal opportunity. Our country is part of the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities, CIADIS, and has been since 2001, and we've actively taken part in all of its monitoring processes. In line with that, we recently presented our 4th regional report on implementation of CIADIS and the program action for the PAD, and we have successfully shared our advancement with the Committee on Eliminating All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities studies, reiterating our commitment to the objectives and values of this regional instrument. Based on that conviction, we work in Peru to build a more accessible and inclusive country, driving public policies aimed at ensuring full exercise of the human rights of persons with disabilities. Some of the more recent achievements that deserve special mention are the incorporation of persons with disabilities in the Amber Alert System, which is a mechanism that allows us to immediately send and disseminate a public alert in cases of disappearance, mobilizing authorities, communication networks, and citizens in order to find the individual that has gone missing. And this is part of our state's effort to ensure that we are more effective in situations of risk. We also continue to promote economic autonomy of persons with disabilities through the various policies for equality and spaces to promote producers around the country who suffer from disabilities. Similarly, through our Peru network, we have been able to provide services to people around the country and provide social support for persons and their families, ensuring their well-being. We know that there are still major challenges ahead in ensuring full participation of persons with disabilities in all areas of social life, economic and political life as well, but we continue in Peru to act with a sense of responsibility and commitment in order to consolidate any achievements already achieved, strengthen our public policies to promote equality before the law, accessibility, and respect for human dignity. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Perú.
Thank you, Peru. Barbados.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barbados is honored to address this body as we honor a day that calls us not only to reflect, but to act with purpose and moral clarity. It invites us to examine whether our democracies are truly anchored in dignity, equality, and justice for all. It reminds us that real progress is not defined by economic indicators alone, but by how we uphold the rights and humanity for all of our people, especially those whose voices have long been muted by structural barriers. Barbados maintains that when inclusion is real, not symbolic, not selective, but embedded in the fabric of our institutions, everyone benefits. Our societies become more resilient, our economies become more innovative, and our democracies more humane. On this International Day of Persons with Disabilities, Barbados reaffirms its obligation to build a democracy where every person is valued, where equal access is guaranteed, and where dignity is a birthright for all. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Barbados. Ecuador, please. Thank you, Chair. We are thinking of the Brazilian teachers, Paulo Freire, who taught us that disabilities are not an individual problem, but rather a social construct, and Mario Sergio Cortella, who stated that ethics require equal consideration, not simply helping someone, but rather promoting respect, independence, and full participation. Today, on December 10th, 2025, we are gathered here to reflect on the advancements achieved and challenges in advancing the rights of persons with disabilities in our region in the framework of the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is celebrated every December 3rd. Many delegations have already spoken before me and referred to the motto provided by the United Nations, which invites us to recognize that inclusion is an essential tenet for sustainable development and democratic development in our nations as well. The Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities commits all of us to eliminating barriers and promoting full integration in all environments, educational, labor, social, and political. And against this backdrop, we must redouble our efforts in order to establish mechanisms for monitoring with active participation of persons with disabilities in order to measure the real impact of inclusive policies, promote spaces for actively listening to one another and when we address persons with disabilities, and ensure that they have a meaningful impact on public policies and decision-making. Demanding that states urgently and visibly prioritize persons with disabilities in their budgets. Recognizing people with disabilities is not just a legal obligation, but rather a democratic need that enriches our societies, strengthens our institutions, and ensures that policies reflect the diversity of our populations. By promoting inclusive societies, we are able to build a fairer, more equitable, and prosperous society. On behalf of the Republic of Ecuador, we reiterate our commitment to these principles, and we extend an invitation to collaborate in regional initiatives to be held along these lines. Together, we can contribute to eliminating discrimination and stigmas, ensuring that all voices are respected and reflected in public policies in our hemisphere. Thank you. Thank you very much for your intervention. The Observer Mission of Spain is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Spain echoes the commemoration of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, an opportunity to reflect on our collective commitment to equality, autonomy, dignity for all individuals. This is a commitment that is translated into tangible activities both in and outside of our borders for a fairer, more egalitarian, more visible future for all men and women. We celebrate the recently renewed Article 49 in our national constitution, which grants full dignity to persons with disabilities and guides our national policies. This is in line with this mandate. We have also adopted wide-ranging reforms of the law on the rights of persons with disabilities and the law on dependents. This consolidates inclusion and personal autonomy as well as universal access with a special focus on women and children who faced discrimination. This reform is something that incorporates key components of institutions and ableism, and it looks at inclusive education, labor inclusion, rehabilitation, the right to living in community, and others. In order to make these rights a reality in daily life, we have adopted our system for autonomy and care for dependents and providing personal assistance and ensuring that services provided are compatible with needs in order to ensure labor participation of persons with disabilities. Similarly, creating the second National Plan of Action for Universal Access 2023-2032, and we have provided tens of millions of euros for accessibility, and this reflects our commitment in ensuring that all public spaces and services are fully accessible. On the other hand, our strategy for foreign policy and the new law on cooperation situates the rights of persons with disabilities at the very heart of human rights. We are one of the few countries that has ensured that our foreign service includes a special mission and ambassador for the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Finally, I'd like to also remind you that the Ibero-American community has chosen the path of equality in the Sao Paulo Declaration, declaring that Spanish and Portuguese are languages of inclusion and innovation. And another example of our work is right here in the OAS, where we have been able to work with a special group, 11 group from Spain. That is a group that provides assistance to persons with disabilities in countries of Latin America, strengthening their participation in decision-making bodies, as well as in access to information on culture, without forgetting the support from Ms. Sagvi and intersectionality when it comes to gender-based violence and disability. Today's commemoration is a reminder of our responsibility to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are exercised in full, transforming our societies and projecting this commitment. Thank you very much. Thank you to Spain. The Observer Mission of Italy is recognized. Thank you, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Madam ASG, distinguished ambassadors, distinguished representatives. It's a pleasure for the Italian delegation to take part in this debate on this very important topic on the agenda of the Permanent Council's agenda, and that is promoting the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities. Italy is part of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and we believe that their full inclusion is a barometer of development and the maturity of any society. The commitment of our country has been reflected in our government's activities, as well as in the words of the President of Italy, Sergio Mattarelli, who has repeatedly focused on the need to overcome any form of exclusion and promote an inclusive environment. This is also a duty stemming from the UN Convention. Including persons with disabilities from school age into labor insertion is a factor of social development and democracy. According to available data, persons with disabilities who suffer from serious limitations that are obstacles to the development of normal activities are over 5% of the population in Italy in all. That is about 3.5 million Italian citizens, men and women. Our experience in Italy shows that working toward full inclusion requires systematic and constant effort from institutions, the private sector, and civil society. As underscored just a few days ago by the President of the Republic, inclusion enriches an entire community, and it contributes to ensuring social, authentic, and shared progress, ensuring that persons with disabilities are not considered to be a burden, but rather full members of public life. This is the compass that guides our activities both nationally and multilaterally. Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchas gracias, Italia.
Thank you very much, Italy. Holy See has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Holy See truly appreciates that this session of the Permanent Council has included on the agenda the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This day invites us to take a look at a reality which deeply affects so many people, women and men, children, boys and girls, and that calls for a commitment to accompany them, to support them, and to recognize them. It's a question of a responsibility that rests on the shoulders of families as well as society as a whole, which requires human sensibility, ethic approach, and political will. The Pope Leon XIV has recently reaffirmed in his visit to the Cross Hospital in Lebanon, and I quote, "We cannot imagine a society that runs ahead based on false myths of well-being, overlooking situations where there's poverty and weakness," end quote. The Holy See upholds and says that persons with disabilities have the same rights and duties as any other person. And there, with particular charity, we look at the greatness and the innate abilities that all human beings have, given the simple fact of being that way. And we want to promote their measures through efficient and appropriate measures that guarantee their active inclusion in social, cultural, and work life. May this day be a clarion call to uphold more humane societies which are more open and more loving, so that we cannot discard people and so that everyone can find their own place. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Holy See of the Remission of France has the floor.
Chair, Madam ASG, ladies and gentlemen, dear permanent representatives, colleagues, thank you very much for including on today's order of business the commemoration of the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. This is a day proclaimed by the UNGA, and it's held every December 3rd in order to remind us that inclusion, accessibility, and full participation of persons with disabilities, which represent over 15% of the global population, is not a sectoral issue, but rather a fundamental challenge when it comes to human rights. It invites us all to measure the progress achieved as well as persistent challenges when it comes to building truly inclusive societies. France reiterates its deep commitment to respecting persons with disabilities, as well as our commitment to promoting equal opportunities in all spheres of public, social, cultural, and professional life. We must focus on the effectiveness of universal laws when it comes to employment, ensuring full participation in social life. And France is promoting the integration of persons with disabilities in society as a priority. The International Triannual Conference on Disabilities has provided us with a series of solutions that promote investments of 1.5 billion euros by 2030 to ensure inclusivity for the day-to-day life of persons with disabilities. From the 1st of December 2025, we are now ensuring that wheelchairs are fully reimbursed by our healthcare system, and we have ensured that we have subtitles for and audio descriptions available in cinemas for persons with visual or hearing disabilities. We have a convention on the rights of persons with disabilities and promote the strengthening globally of public policies that promote universal accessibility, the fight against discrimination, access to education, employment, public services, and civil participation. We support the candidacy of Marie Rabatel in the elections of the Committee of Persons with Disabilities to be held in June next year. As co-founder and chair of the Francophone Association of Autistic Women, she is strongly committed to the fight against sexual violence against persons in situations of vulnerability. And during the International Week of Disabilities in 2025, we're committed in France to specific needs of persons in situations of disability in humanitarian interventions, as well as part of our 2023 to 2027 humanitarian strategy in France. We also remind you of our constant support for the Inter-American system to promote inclusion throughout the entire hemisphere, and we will continue to be committed to all member states and civil society organizations to promote this effort. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por su intervención.
Thank you very much for your comments. Once again, we would like to thank our presenters for their presentations as commemoration, as well as all of you who have participated with your comments. The chair proposes that the Permanent Council take due note of the presentations and all of the comments that will be included in the minutes of this meeting. As there are no objections, it is so agreed. Let's move on to the next item. Style Commission for the regular meeting of the 58th meeting of the General Assembly. Document will be addressed. The 55th regular period and the 58th special session of the General Assembly corrects the speaker. This is document CP Doc 6165/25. And for that, I should like to give the floor to the President of the Commission, the alternate representative from Antigua and Barbuda, Joy D. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an honor in my capacity as Chair of the Style Committee for the 55th regular and 58th special sessions of the General Assembly to present the report on the work carried out pursuant to Article 28 of the Rules of Procedure of the General Assembly. In accordance with this provision, the Permanent Council at its meetings of June 18th and October 8th, 2025, appointed the following delegations as members of the Style Committee: Brazil for Portuguese, Canada for French, Colombia for Spanish, and Antigua and Barbuda for English. Pursuant to its mandate, the committee reviewed 15 resolutions adopted at the 55th regular session, excluding Declaration 117 on the question of the Malvinas Islands, as well as the program budget of the organization for 2026, adopted at the 58th special session. Additionally, at its meeting of August 6, 2025, the Permanent Council instructed the committee to review in all official languages the recommendations of Santiago de los Caballeros on police reform and modernization for citizen security with social engagement, as adopted at the 8th meeting of the ministers responsible for public security in the Americas. The purpose of these reviews was to correct defects of form, ensure editorial quality, and maintain linguistic coherence across all official languages of the organization. The working sessions took place on November 10th and 11th, 2025, as early as feasible in keeping with the commitment assumed by the Assistant Secretary General, particularly given the holding of the most recent special session of the General Assembly on October 15th. The meetings were open to all delegations and for the first time benefited from interpretation services and the technological tools necessary to facilitate the committee's work with the support of the translators of the Department of Conference and Meeting Management and the staff of the Secretariat of the Permanent Council. The committee did not identify any defects of form requiring the Permanent Council's intervention. With respect to Resolution 3039, calling for concrete solutions to be brought to bear as a matter of urgency to resolve the grave security and institutional crisis in Haiti, the original French text uses gangs without reference to weapons, while the English, Spanish, and Portuguese versions imply armament. At the chair's proposal, the committee agreed by consensus to retain this terminology in all language versions, consistent with previous General Assembly practice. Similarly, regarding operative paragraph 4 of the recommendations of Santiago de los Caballeros, although the committee sought to refine its wording, which is not fully coherent in any language, it was agreed by consensus to retain the paragraph as originally approved in all language versions, respecting the adopted text. The text reviewed by the committee were published on December 5th, 2025 in all official languages for the consideration of member states prior to this meeting. Mr. Chair, building on lessons learned from previous sessions, I respectfully submit the following recommendations to strengthen continuity and improve the efficiency of future style committees. First, that preliminary coordination meetings between translators and committee secretaries continue to identify and resolve early issues and ensure harmonized texts. Second, that style committee meetings be convened promptly after each General Assembly session, preferably within 4 months to allow sufficient time for review. Third, that translators continue conducting advanced reviews of provisional documents, focusing on consistency in terminology, acronyms, official titles, and editorial elements. Fourth, that the secretariats of the Permanent Council and of CD maintain their preliminary review of queries to streamline the committee's work and focus on substantive matters. Fifth, that multilingual tools such as multi-language screens and interpretation remain available when resources permit. Sixth, that documents continue to be circulated well in advance to allow delegations adequate time for review. Seventh, that institutional consistency be preserved by applying terminology and phrasing established in previous resolutions and declarations. And finally, that the committee to concentrate its formal review on substantive or critical issues requiring its consideration, while routine editorial adjustments are addressed during earlier coordination stages. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, I wish to thank all delegations for the confidence reposed in me as chair of this committee. My sincere gratitude also extends to the delegations of Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Haiti, and Mexico for their constructive participation, as well as to the translators and staff of the Secretariat of the Permanent Council for enabling the committee to fulfill its mandate. On behalf of the Style Committee, I have the honor to submit this report for the consideration of the Permanent Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Chair of the Style Committee for the presentation. I would like to give the floor to delegates who might like to make comments on the report. Very well. If there are no further comments, I reiterate our thanks to the chair of the Style Committee, and through her, we would like to congratulate the members of the committee for the work done, and of course, to the secretary of the meeting and the interpreters. The chair proposes that the Permanent Council take note of the report of the Style Committee corresponding to the 55th regular session and the 58th special session of the General Assembly, document CP Doc 6165/25, including the recommendations contained therein. As there are no comments, it is so agreed. Let's move on to item 8. To have this topic, we have the consideration of the executive directors of this organization to approve a transfer between chapters of the regular fund in accordance with the provisions of Article 110 of the General Rules for the General Secretariat. In keeping with the reasons in the note of the executive director distributed to the delegations as CP Doc 6163/25, the request for the approval of this council is needed to exceed the limit of the 2.5% on the transfers between chapters in order to reverse the transfer from a P4 post of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism to the office of the Assistant Secretary General, approved by the General Assembly in the program budget of the organization for 2026. Thus, along that line, I would like to consult delegations if there is an agreement in approving this request from the executive director. And looking at any suggestions. Columbia has the floor. Columbia would like to thank the ED's office for presenting this request in keeping with Article 110 of the General Standards to approve a transfer between chapters. Nonetheless, our delegation requests, in all due respect, that this topic be referred to the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, CAP, for its consideration as a technical and competent body of the Permanent Council. CAP should have an opportunity to open up a dialogue with the Office of the ED and the other areas involved to better understand the reasons and the justification of this and other requests related to budgetary issues. This takes into account that during the negotiation of the program budget for 2026, member states worked and we focused on avoiding any earmarking for various areas of the organization. Columbia underscores the importance to guarantee that the technical committee be fully informed of these kinds of requests and that we can have the necessary consultation with the General Secretariat. Through this process, it will allow CAP to provide the Permanent Council with recommendations that are based on the best way to move ahead, and it takes away the burden from this council so that it only includes issues when they are ready to be approved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Columbia, for your comments. Canada has the floor.
We are in full agreement with the delegation of Colombia and the request to refer this item to the CAP in accordance with the established procedures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Thank you very much for your remarks. United States has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports referring to the CAP the proposed transfer of this position so that the issue can be discussed following appropriate established procedures. Thank you.
Perfecto.
Very well. Thank you very much. Given that, and if you agree, taking into consideration the comments made by the delegations of Colombia, Canada, and the United States, the chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the Executive Director's request to approve a transfer between chapters of the regular fund, and that this be sent off for consideration to the CAP, and asks that the chair inform this council on the results of the deliberations so that there is time enough to discuss these kinds of issues. Does the group agree to this kind of solution? If everybody agrees, then it is so agreed. Let's move on to item 9 of our agenda. For the next item on the agenda today, the chair would like to send out to the CAP for consideration of member states the second monthly report on the implementation of the operational paragraph 6 of Resolution 1291 of the Permanent Council, sent off by the Executive Director and distributed as document CP Inf 10769/25. This is the second report on the implementation of the operative paragraph contained in Resolution 1291. Now, this proposal is based on what was in Article 31 of the Rules and Regulations that stipulates that all issues presented to the Permanent Council and which its judgment requires previous study will be sent off to the committee, which will provide a report according to Article C of Article 19 that grants the CAP the function of studying the other subjects that entrust or are entrusted to the Council with the programs, the budget, the administration, and financial aspects of the operations of the General Secretariat. It is also proposed that the chair of the council be authorized so that additional reports that are received on implementation of this resolution are referred directly to the CAP for consideration by member states. No objections? Agreed. Item 10, proceedings of the Permanent Council. As the next point, I'd like to consult the Permanent Council if we can proceed with the approval of the following minutes. Minutes 2417 of the special session of February 22nd, 2023. ACT 2418 of the joint session held on March 8th, 2023. Minutes 2419 of the regular session held on March 8th, 2023. Minutes 2421 of the special session of March 29th, 2023. Minutes 2425 of the regular session held on April 20th, 2023. Minutes 2426 of the special session of April 21st, 2023. Minutes 2428 of the special session on May 12th, 2023. And minutes 2569 of the special meeting of the November 5th, 2025. All agreed? Approved. Last item on the agenda today, other matters. We have concluded the agenda of this session, but before I have to read this first now. Before giving the floor to delegations, I would like to inform you that the Secretary distributed a notice from this chair last Monday inviting delegations of member states to participate in an informal meeting of the Permanent Council in agreement with the Permanent Mission of Guyana, which will be held this Friday, December 12th at 11 a.m. in Jose Guerrero Hall. There will be interpretation in English and Spanish. The purpose of this meeting is to receive Mrs. Pauline Chase, candidate of Guyana, to complete the mandate of former Commissioner Bulkin in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. In addition to that, delegations are reminded that the last regular meeting of 2025 will be held next Wednesday, December 17th. Those delegations that wish to present proposals for topics for this session must send their request to the Secretariat no later than tomorrow, Thursday, at the end of the day, with a view to allowing the timely consideration on Friday, first thing in the morning. Having said that, I would like to offer the floor to delegations that wish to raise other matters that are strictly informative. It is recorded that, according to Article 45C of the Rules and Regulations, the chair will call any representative to order when their comments under other matters are not merely informative. So I should like to give the floor to St. Lucia first and foremost. St. Lucia has the floor.
Chair, my delegation informs the Permanent Council that general elections were held in St. Lucia on December 1st, 2025. The people of St. Lucia exercised their democratic rights peacefully. The process was conducted in an atmosphere that was free, fair, transparent, and orderly, and the will of the people was clearly and respectfully expressed. We informed that the St. Lucia Labour Party secured 14 of the 17 seats in the House of Assembly. The United Workers' Party won 1 seat, and 2 independent candidates who contested under the banner of the St. Lucia Labour Party were successfully re-elected. As a result, the Philip J. Pierre-led Labour Party maintained a strong legislative majority, paving the way for his continuation in office as Prime Minister. The Honorable Philip J. Pierre was sworn in as St. Lucia's Prime Minister on December 5th, 2025. The Cabinet of Ministers will be sworn in on Friday, December 12, 2025. St. Lucia had the privilege of hosting an electoral observation mission from the Organization of American States, as well as an observer team from CARICOM. Their presence provided an additional layer of confidence in our electoral process as we continuously strive to maintain credibility and integrity, especially in the era of widespread misinformation and disinformation. The CARICOM mission comprised of an 11-member team, and on election day was deployed to 317 of the 480 polling stations across 14 of the 17 constituencies. In its preliminary report, the CARICOM Election Observation Mission concluded, and I quote, "The CEOM is of the view that on election day, electors were able to exercise their franchise in a peaceful, orderly, and transparent manner and without significant incident. Polling day workers performed their duties professionally and are commended for their dedication. The police force maintained law and order, exhibiting high professionalism in their interaction with electors and stakeholders," end quote. The OAS EOM comprised of 14 officials, observed electoral process in 104 of the 480 polling stations across 16 constituencies. According to the OAS EOM preliminary report, and I quote, "The vote count began promptly and proceeded in an organized and transparent manner. Polling officials demonstrated a sound understanding of the counting and reconciliation procedures, and party agents followed the process closely, raising no significant objections," end quote. Prime Minister Pierre extends his appreciation to Secretary General Ramdin for accepting the request to observe St. Lucia's general elections. We extend appreciation to the Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation and the members of the mission for their professionalism and constructive engagement. Special appreciation is extended to the head of mission, Ambassador Riyad Insanali. We also wish to place on record our gratitude to the donors, the Dominican Republic, Republic of Korea, the Netherlands, and the United States, who provided the financial support that enabled the deployment of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission. Their contribution underscores the importance of solidarity and partnership in safeguarding democratic processes within our hemisphere. We look forward to the presentation of the final report to the Permanent Council. St. Lucia remains fully committed to the principles of transparency, accountability, and free expression of the will of the people. We commend the OAS for its continued support of electoral observation as a central pillar of the inter-American system. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias, Santa Lucía. Nuevamente también.
Thank you very much, St. Lucia. Congratulations for your electoral success. Columbia has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just have an ordinary announcement. Tomorrow, Columbia is going to have an event at 4 p.m. for everyone, for all of you in the Hall of the Americas. The event is called Peace, Equity, and Regional Development, Transformative. And this is addressed to all people. We'll expect all of you to be there. We'll have a discussion panel ready for you with a presentation of a musical group. Salsa will be played. So get your dancing shoes on, and there's going to be some Colombian food to eat as well. So from the bottom of our heart, we expect all of you, and that's a wonderful way to end that day. Thank you very much. Costa Rica has the floor. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. We're all tired, but for Costa Rica, it is really very important to mention the following. On December, we commemorate one of the most important days of our Republican history, the abolition of the Army. Here, we have a very different fate of most nations. This destination is different, and in 1948, our country decided that this force would not be necessary. The abolition of the Army was not just a symbolic act, it was a valiant move forward for peace and for development that prioritizes people. Instead of investing in bellicose machinery, we invest in public health, healthcare, and education with a vision of the future that trusts more collective intelligence than military intimidation. And since then, Article 12 of our Constitution has been more than a legal convention. It's an ethical and political affirmation. It has strengthened the rule of law and our trust in international law, and it has consolidated the values and principles that we are identified by in the entire world. 77 years later, the decision to abolish the Army is not just a statement, but it's a conquest. We celebrate peace, a country that understands that progress is better defined by words, education, not by these other kinds of acts. So this commemoration is special for all Costa Ricans, and it's an opportunity to remember that peace is not a legacy but a daily duty. We continue to protect this national piece of pride in a collective way so that we are a democratic society. And this is possible when people choose the path of democracy and human rights. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Costa Rica.
Información. Por último, tiene la palabra Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're all very tired. I will be brief. First of all, I would like to thank you and the Secretariat for having included in our formal request from our delegation to distribute to the other delegations a summary of my intervention, which will be exclusively informative in nature. It has been 1 year since the illegal detention of Argentine citizen Nahuel Gaibo and the government of Argentina expresses its rejection of this violation, which is incompatible with international law, and the situation of our citizen who is detained illegally without any legal guarantees or access by his family members is an arbitrary detention, and it is unjustified by the Venezuelan authorities, as has been repeatedly denounced by our country. The Argentine gendarme being held in this unacceptable situation is a very clear case of a forced disappearance. This is a flagrant violation of international law. Against this backdrop, the Republic of Argentina has used many different international fora to denounce those responsible before international bodies that are competent, as well as coordinating many diplomatic efforts in order to ensure his freedom. In other instances, Argentina has presented the case before the ICHR, asking for urgent precautionary measures before the International Criminal Court due to the arbitrary detention and forced disappearance, before the Council of Human Rights at the United Nations, because this is a flagrant violation of human rights of Nahuel Gaibo. The Argentine government will continue to support the family members of Nahuel Gaibo in this very serious circumstance, and we will not spare any effort in ensuring that he is soon freed and returned to our country. And to the over 1,000 detainees, we do not know where any of them are, whether they are Venezuelan or foreign citizens under the dictatorial regime of Nicolas Maduro. Chair, this Christmas, Nahuel Gaibo will not be with his family. And the photo that I distributed is that of his son and his wife. And there are so many other Nahuels who also will not be able to join their families on Christmas. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for that information. And I reiterate once again that we should always maintain the spirit of the provision. And with that, we will conclude today's session. If there are no further requests for the floor, Thank you very much to all of the delegations for your participation. This session is adjourned. Thank you.